Classmates, there are only 3 months left until the college entrance exam. My teacher, Li Ming, stood at the front of the room, her voice steady but heavy. She told us it was time to choose our path, the liberal arts or the martial arts track. If we chose martial arts, the registration fee was 30,000 yuan. We had 7 days to bring the money. I sat by the window, staring out at the sky, whispering the number to myself. 30,000. A bitter taste filled my mouth. I had worked so hard. My martial talent was decent, and my blood vitality ranked near the top of the class. But 30,000 yuan? Even with my part-time jobs, there was no way a student like me could scrape that together in a week. After class, I followed Li Ming to her office. My throat felt tight as I asked her if I could have a few extra days to pay. She looked at me, and I saw the pity in her eyes. I knew she liked me. I was a hard worker, ranking in the top 10 of her class. But this was a regular class, not an elite one. Usually, only the top 3 had a real shot at a martial arts university. To her, my 30,000 yuan would probably be a waste of money my family didn't have. She knew my history. My parents died in a beast tide when I was 3. Since then, I'd lived with my uncle, Su Guoming. He had 2 kids of his own, both practicing martial arts. Supporting one martial artist is a nightmare for a normal family. Supporting 3 was impossible. Su Hong, it's not that I don't want to help, Li Ming said gently. But the rules are the rules. I can't grant an extension. She suggested I could try a private martial arts hall instead of the university track. We both knew that was a lie. The resources at a university compared to a private hall were like heaven and earth. There was no comparison. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out. Standing outside the school building, I looked up at the sun. It had been 18 years since I crossed over into this world. It looked like my old world, but everything was different. 300 years ago, a star seed fell from the heavens, and martial arts were reborn. Beasts mutated, and alien races from the 1,000 realms began their invasion. When I first arrived, I was full of ambition. I dreamed of becoming a peak powerhouse and crushing our enemies. But now, reality had caught up to me. All those grand dreams were being strangled by a 30,000 yuan entrance fee. Su Hong, what are you standing there for? Let's spar. A loud voice broke my trance. It was Chen Lin, my best friend and seatmate. He was waving at me from the gym steps. I took a deep breath. There was no use worrying about the money right now. I had to focus on the work in front of me. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the moon took its place. Inside the gym, the lights stayed bright. We were all drenched in sweat, our faces set with determination. In a quiet corner, a dull thud echoed through the hall. Chen Lin stumbled back several steps, clutching his palm and grimacing in pain. Su Hong, your Vajra punch improved again, he hissed, shaking his hand. Did you reach the micro level? I nodded. A couple of days ago. In martial arts, mastery is divided into stages: entry, mastery, and micro level. Reaching micro level meant my control was becoming precise. Chen Lin looked at me with a mix of awe and resentment. He wanted to sneak out at 5, but I dragged him through drills until his stomach was growling. Eventually, I let him go, but before he left, he leaned in close. Do you know about the underground boxing matches? He whispered. I froze. Underground boxing was a gray industry. It was bloody, violent, and dangerous. People fought for prize money while the crowd gambled on their lives. I'd thought about it because of the fee, but those fighters were grizzled veterans or hunters who killed beasts for a living. They were killers. I'm not crazy, Chen Lin said, seeing my expression. I just meant we should go watch and see some real combat. You coming? Maybe, I replied. He left, and I stayed. I practiced my Vajra punch until the gym was empty and the clock struck midnight. After a quick shower, I walked home through the silent, moonlit streets. The loneliness of the night only made my future feel more uncertain. I reached my apartment complex, a rundown place with flickering streetlights. As I reached for the door handle, I heard voices from inside. It was my uncle and aunt. The rent is due in a month, my aunt said quietly. We're still short 8,000. There was a long silence, followed by a heavy sigh from my uncle. I'll find a way. Don't tell the kids. Especially Xiaohong. He's at a critical point with the exams coming up. Don't let him know. I pulled my hand back from the door and leaned against the cold hallway wall. I couldn't move. I know, my aunt whispered, her voice trembling with worry. But the neighbors said the registration fee for the martial arts track is expensive. How much is it? A few tens of thousands, my uncle replied. The house went dead silent. I stood there in the dark, the weight of the 30,000 yuan feeling heavier than any mountain. The sound of a lighter flickered through the thin walls. My uncle, Su Guoming, walked to the window and lit a cigarette. He didn't say a word. The silence was heavy until my aunt finally spoke, her voice trembling with hesitation. She suggested stopping her medication. She said it wasn't working anyway, and the money could be saved for the kids. Xiaohai and Xiaoming were in middle school and growing fast. They needed food, especially if they were going to practice martial arts. She wanted to go back to work, saying the sewing she did at home wasn't enough. Your health is too poor, Su Guoming grunted, his voice deep and firm. Don't even think about it. You focus on your treatment. The kids will eat what they need to eat. Don't skimp on that. And Xiao Hong's registration fee. She has the best talent in this family. She has to keep training. My aunt started to protest, but he cut her off gently. He told her that as long as he was there, he would find a way. He warned her not to tell us kids, especially since I'd be home any minute. I stood in the dark hallway, my head hanging low, my fists clenched so tight they shook. After a moment, I took a deep breath, forced a smile onto my face, and pushed the door open. I'm back, I announced. In the cramped living room, Uncle Su was lying on the sofa while my aunt held a pungent medicinal plaster. The moment they saw me, the worry on their faces vanished, replaced by warm smiles. They asked how my training went. I grinned and told them I'd made huge progress. I stepped forward and naturally took the plaster from my aunt's hand, offering to help. She poked my head playfully, joking about me trying to steal her job of taking care of her husband. We all laughed, but the laughter felt thin. Once the plaster was on, Uncle Su stood up and patted my shoulder. He told me to get some rest so I wouldn't be tired for tomorrow's practice. I teased him, asking if he needed me to carry him to his room. He glared at me, raising a hand as if to strike, but his eyes were full of pride. I laughed and dodged, running into my bedroom. Behind me, I heard him chuckle and shake his head, but then I heard a sharp gasp of pain. He had gripped his waist, his face contorting. My aunt hurried to support him as they limped toward their room. I closed my bedroom door softly, and the smile died on my lips. Our apartment was tiny, 2 bedrooms for 5 people. My aunt and uncle had one, while I shared the other with my younger brother, Xiaohai, and my sister, Xiaoming. I climbed toward my bunk, trying to be quiet so I wouldn't wake them. Brother? You still awake? Xiaohai's voice came from the darkness. I'm awake too, Xiaoming added, poking her head out from under her blanket. I sighed, asking why they were still up. Xiaohai sat up, his expression serious. He told me he wanted to drop out of school. My heart sank. I asked if someone was bullying him, but he scoffed, saying he'd be the one doing the bullying. He told me he wanted to help the family. He said he was already stronger than our father and could help him move crates at the warehouse. Xiaoming chimed in, saying she was even stronger than Xiaohai and could help too. The two of them started bickering about who was stronger, but I stayed silent. I realized they had heard everything through the walls. They wanted to quit school so I could focus on martial arts and become a professional. They were willing to sacrifice their futures so I could carry the family. My chest felt tight. They were so young, yet they were trying to be so brave. Forget it, I said, rubbing my face and forcing a confident grin. You two stay in school. I've already found a way to handle the rent and the fees. Their eyes lit up. They asked if I was serious. I nodded, acting arrogant to sell the lie. I told them their brother was a genius and that they shouldn't underestimate my talent. They laughed, seeing through my exaggerated posture, and I gave Xiaohai a playful flick on the forehead. Xiaoming hid under her covers, giggling. I told them to go to sleep and stepped back out into the hallway. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the night sky. My talent? Maybe it was okay, but it wasn't enough. I thought back to what Chenlin had said about the underground fights. I pulled out my cracked phone and searched for the prize money listings. With my Vajra punch at the micro level of mastery, I actually had a chance. I had been hesitant before, but seeing my siblings ready to give up their dreams made my blood boil. I was an 18-year-old man. I couldn't be a coward while they were being heroes. Just as I made my decision, A crisp electronic chime echoed in my brain. Ding. Detecting host's unwavering martial heart. System binding successful. Ding. Starter pack opened automatically. Ding. Congratulations. You have obtained the talent. Eternal unparalleled. I froze. A system? I had lived in this world for 18 years and had long since given up hope for any kind of miracle. My eyes sharpened. The game had just changed. I stared at the lines of text floating in my vision. My eyes locked onto the words, eternal unparalleled. I let out a dry, complicated laugh. Maybe I'd always had this system, but I just hadn't found the trigger to wake it up until now. They say you need an unwavering heart to achieve greatness, but that's easier said than done. If I hadn't heard my uncle's desperation tonight, if my siblings hadn't been willing to throw away their dreams just to save me, I might never have found this resolve. I was ready to burn my bridges. I took a deep breath to steady my racing heart and began to study the interface. As the minutes ticked by, my eyes grew brighter. The system was incredibly powerful. Simply put, if I defeated or killed any enemy, including ferocious beasts, I would earn martial points. I could spend those points to increase my blood chi, my skills, or even my physical attributes. I called up the status panel in my mind. A clean, simple screen appeared before me. Name, Suhong. Talent, eternal unparalleled. Blood chi, 85 plus. Mental power, 23 plus. Constitution, mortal 3% plus. Skills, Vajra punch, micro 7% plus. Floating light palm, proficient 35% plus. Skystep, beginner 56% plus. Martial points, 0. Every attribute had a plus sign next to it. My blood chi was at 85, which was 3 points higher than it had been a month ago. I was close. At 90 points, I'd be a quasi-warrior. At 100, I'd be a true rank 1 warrior. But then, I saw the mental power stat. I couldn't believe it. In this world, there is another path besides being a warrior. Mentalists. They can control objects with their minds, and they are terrifyingly strong. Only one person in a million is born with that potential. And here I was, looking at a system that could actually upgrade my mental strength. I forced myself to stay calm and kept scrolling. My constitution was listed as mortal. I knew from my studies that everyone's body is different. Some people are born with special constitutions that let them cultivate at lightning speed. Seeing that plus sign made my heart hammer against my ribs. Could I eventually evolve my body into something legendary? I shifted my focus to the talent, eternal unparalleled. I wanted to know exactly what the greatest talent in history actually meant. I clicked the description. It was simple. The possessor of this talent is the undisputed #1 in all of history. No one is their equal. I blinked, feeling a bit stunned. I didn't feel like a god. But then, I tried to think back to the problems I'd had while practicing the Vajra punch. Suddenly, those complicated movements felt incredibly simple. It was like an adult looking at a first-grade math problem. 1 + 1 = 2. No thinking required. The answers just appeared in my mind. My throat went dry. I thought about the floating light palm and the sky step technique. A thought flashed through my head. How was I ever so stupid? It felt like I'd been trying to solve equations while wearing a blindfold, and now the blindfold was gone. I needed to test this. My apartment was on the 5th floor, and there was a small clearing in the complex below. I vaulted over the hallway railing and activated Skystep. At my current beginner level, I could usually only kick the air once to slightly slow a fall. I figured one solid kick would be enough to let me land safely from the 5th floor. I was wrong. My foot hit the air, but it didn't feel like air. It felt like I was stepping on solid concrete. A massive sonic boom erupted in the quiet night. Instead of falling, I shot upward like a human rocket. I cleared 3 stories in a single bound and landed hard on the roof of the building. I stood on the edge of the roof, staring down at my feet in total shock. No way, I whispered. I had jumped 3 stories from a mid-air kick. It felt impossible. Then, the system chime echoed in my brain. Ding. Skystep upgraded. Beginner to proficient. Ding. Skystep upgraded. Proficient to micro. I stood there, completely frozen. I had used the move once. Just once, and now it was at the micro level. I took a sharp breath, finally realizing what eternal unparalleled meant. This was a low-level technique, sure, but mastering it in the time it took to breathe was insane. If I could do this with Skystep, what about my other skills? What about the Earth-rank Vajra Punch? Would that only take 2 breaths? Who's the idiot setting off fireworks at 2 in the morning? A voice screamed from the apartments below. You crazy brat. If I catch you, I'll blow your head off. I winced and rubbed the back of my head. The sonic boom from my kick had woken up the entire neighborhood. I didn't want to deal with angry neighbors, so I hurried to the other side of the roof and jumped down. This time, I took it slow, hopping from balcony to balcony until I hit the ground silently. I slipped past the sleeping security guard at the gate. When I had walked into this complex earlier today, I was drowning in despair. Now, I was walking out with a fire in my soul. I just needed a little more time. I could fix everything. I could pay the rent, get my aunt the treatment she needed, and keep my siblings in school. I could even afford my own exam fees. Before, I was going to the underground fights out of desperation. Now, with the system, I was going there to dominate. A few minutes later, I arrived at a nearby open-air training ground. It was nearly 3 a.m., and the place was deserted. I'd been training all day, but the adrenaline kept me from feeling any fatigue. I noticed 2 new machines near the back, Rank 1 combat power testers. These machines were built to measure a warrior's true strength. You hit them with everything you have, and they spit out a number. These specific models were designed to handle anyone up to a Rank 1 warrior. In this world, we have trainees, quasi-warriors, and then ranks 1 through 9. Rank 7 is the level of a grandmaster. From Rank 1 onward, each stage is split into low, mid, and high segments. Usually, people judge your rank by your blood chi, but real combat power is never that simple. I walked toward the machine, my fists clenching. I wanted to see exactly what I was capable of now. Your combat power doesn't just come from your raw stats. It depends on the grade of the martial arts you've mastered and your proficiency with them. In this world, martial arts are ranked from F all the way up to SSS. I stood in front of the Rank 1 tester, ready to see where I stood. I took a deep breath, centering myself, and unleashed the Vajra fist. My arm blurred as I threw a heavy punch. There was a dull thud as my fist connected with the machine. The digital display flickered, numbers climbing rapidly until they finally settled. 1,027. I'd broken the 1,000-point mark. My eyebrows shot up in surprise. Usually, a warrior's combat power is about 10 times their blood chi, but that's just a baseline. The real difference maker is the grade and mastery of your techniques. With only 85 points of blood chi, hitting over 1,000 meant I was already at the top of my bracket. I was effectively matching the power of a Rank 1 warrior who wasn't using any techniques at all. It was all thanks to my Vajra fist reaching the subtle stage. I grew curious. My Earth-grade movement technique, the Void Step, had jumped straight to this subtle level with just one move. How much had the Vajra fist improved? I pulled up my system panel. Vajra fist, subtle stage, 58%. I nearly choked. I remembered it being at 7% just moments ago. One single punch had boosted my proficiency by 51%. If I kept this up, I'd hit the perfect stage in minutes. I didn't waste another second. I began practicing the forms right there in the open air. Wish, wish, wish. The sound of my fists cutting through the air grew louder. By the third punch, a powerful aura surged from my body, far stronger than anything I'd felt before. When I swung again, it felt like I was tearing the air apart. A visible wave of pressure rippled out from my fist, hitting the machine. A notification chimed in my head. Vajra fist, great success. I didn't stop. I threw myself entirely into the rhythm, my movements becoming fierce and overbearing. Then it happened. I threw a punch that looked completely ordinary. No flash, no visible effort. But the air in front of my fist exploded with a violent bang. Vajra fist, perfect stage. I pulled out my phone to check the time. Only 15 minutes had passed. Taking an Earth-grade martial art from subtle to perfect in 15 minutes was unheard of. If word got out, people's jaws would hit the floor. I turned back to the tester. I wanted to see my new limit. I wound up and delivered another Vajra fist, exactly like before. Crash. The machine, which weighed several tons, was sent flying. It tumbled backward and slammed into the far wall with a deafening metallic screech. I stood there, stunned. I scrambled over to the machine and tried to set it upright. If I'd broken it, there was no way I could afford the repairs. "Hey, who's there? What are you doing in the middle of the night?" A voice made me jump. I spun around to see a young man with messy hair and sleepy eyes walking toward me. He looked incredibly annoyed. He was a security guard sent by the city to watch over these new testers. Apparently, local warriors had been crowding the place every morning at 6 a.m., and this was the only time he got to sleep. He didn't look happy about being woken up. I could see him sizing me up. He probably thought I was just some kid he could scare off. After all, the highest record on this machine was his own, a score of 1,208. He didn't think any actual rank 1 warriors would bother coming to an outdoor park like this. "Hey, kid," he shouted, stopping mid-sentence when he saw the machine leaning against the wall. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Wait a minute. Were you trying to steal that thing? You've got some nerve." "I wasn't stealing it," I said, struggling to lift the heavy metal frame back into place. "I was just testing it out." "Testing it? Then why is it over by the wall? Don't play games with me." He sneered, but I could see a hint of excitement in his eyes. Catching a thief would probably look good on his record. He started rolling up his sleeves, warming up his arms. "You better give up quietly. Don't even think about fighting me. See that record on the screen? That's mine." I was getting tired of his accusations. "I'm telling you, I didn't steal it. I accidentally hit it too hard, and it flew over there." "You? Hit it that hard?" The guy almost laughed. He couldn't even move the machine like that, and here I was, looking like a high school student, claiming I'd sent it flying. He stepped closer, ready to grab me. But as he passed the machine, his eyes caught the glowing display on the screen. He froze. His pupils dilated, and his head began to whip back and forth between the number on the screen and my face. "You still want to fight?" I asked, my voice turning cold as he kept staring. The guy shivered. A cold sweat broke out on his neck. No, brother, I was just joking. Just pretend I was never here. Keep practicing. Bye." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned on his heel and sprinted away as fast as his legs could carry him. I stood there, scratching my head. What was his problem? I looked down at the screen to see what had spooked him. The number displayed was 1,850. A perfect stage Vajra fist was even more terrifying than I'd imagined. I let out a low whistle and got back to work. I still had 2 more techniques to master. Meanwhile, back in a small security hut, the young guard collapsed into his chair, his heart thumping against his ribs. 1,850? That was almost the level of a mid-stage rank 1 warrior. One punch from a kid like that would have ended him. He wiped his forehead, watching me through the window with lingering fear. Who is this genius? And why on earth is he training in a public park at 3 o'clock in the morning? By 5 a.m., the park was filled with the sound of sonic booms. I was a blur, my feet kicking off the very air itself. Every time I descended, I'd stomp against the atmosphere and launch myself like a cannonball in the opposite direction. Finally, I landed softly on the pavement. I wiped the sweat from my brow and whispered to the void, "System, open status." The status panel shimmered into existence before my eyes. Name, Suhong. Talent, Peerless Eternal. Blood Chi, 85 plus. Spirit, 23 plus. Constitution, 3%. Vajra Fist, perfect stage. Fuguang Palm, perfect stage. Void Step, perfect stage. Martial points, 0. I took a deep breath. In a single night, I had mastered 1 Earth grade technique and 2 rank 1 techniques to the perfect stage. My heart raced with excitement as I clenched my fists, feeling the raw power thrumming through my veins. I walked over to a rank 1 combat testing machine. For a full minute, I unleashed a relentless barrage of punches and palms. The numbers flickered rapidly before settling. My combat strength was fluctuating between 1,800 and 1,900. I did the math. For a rank 1 martial artist, 100 blood chi represented the early stage, 200 was mid-stage, and 300 was high stage. This meant my current combat power was infinitely close to a standard mid-stage rank 1 warrior. The terrifying part? My blood chi was still only 85. I was technically just an ordinary martial apprentice. In the underground boxing circuits, they match people by rank. Apprentice against apprentice, warrior against warrior. With my current strength, I could crush any apprentice or even a quasi-martial artist with ease. The underground matches happened every night. I decided I'd head there tonight to test the waters. But first, I needed to go home. I know training requires hard work, but you shouldn't stay out all night, my aunt said during breakfast. She looked at me with a hesitant, worried smile. You need to learn how to rest. My uncle nodded in agreement, chewing slowly. Don't be so impatient. Persistence is about gradual accumulation. You have to balance work and rest. They acted like everything was normal, showing no sign of the crushing debt or the worries from the night before. Don't worry, Uncle Andy. I feel great, I said, grabbing a bun and smiling back. Dad, Mom, stop worrying, my sister, Su Xiaoming chirped. Brother is as strong as a bull now. You could make him plow a field all day and he wouldn't even pant. My brother, Su Xiaohai, looked like he wanted to crack a joke too, but he remembered the lesson I gave him yesterday. He wisely kept his mouth shut. It turned out to be the right choice. Before I could even react to Xiaoming's teasing, my aunt reached out and pinched her ear. Is that how you talk to your brother? She scolded. Ow, brother, save me. Xiaoming cried out, wincing. I just laughed. Seeing Xiaohai's relieved expression, I knew he was glad he'd stayed quiet. We finished breakfast amidst the usual family banter. Mom, Dad, we're heading to school now. Xiaoming called out. Uncle, Auntie, I'll take them, I added. Be careful on the road, my aunt called after us. Xiaohai, Xiaoming, don't bully your classmates. But if someone bullies you, hit them back hard. Our family doesn't go looking for trouble, but we aren't afraid of it either. Understand? I know, Mom. Xiaoming groaned, dragging out her words. I'm so cute and sweet. How could I ever bully anyone? Xiaohai twitched his lips beside her. You don't bully others because you're too busy beating me up. I could practically see him thinking. He glanced at Xiaoming, saw her warning glare, and immediately looked away. When my aunt looked at him, Xiaohai put on a cool front, tucking his hands behind his back. Mom, I'm the one who bullies others. Who would dare touch me? He whispered under his breath, except for Xiaoming. As soon as we stepped out of the housing complex, the smiles vanished from their faces. A heavy cloud of worry settled over them. Wow, you two learned how to change faces pretty fast, huh? I said, reaching out to ruffle both of their heads. Hey, stop it. I won't grow tall if you keep doing that. Xiaoming protested. Brother, Xiaohai said, looking at me with a flicker of hope in his eyes. Was what you said yesterday true? Is there really a way to fix things? You aren't just lying to us. Xiaoming stopped complaining and looked up at me too. Brother, tell us the truth. If there's no way, we'll just drop out of school and help out at home. I stopped walking and grabbed their shoulders, turning them to face me. My voice was steady and serious. Trust me, I'm not lying. I really have a way. Seeing my expression, their eyes finally lit up. They knew that when I looked like this, I wasn't joking. Yes, Xiaoming cheered, jumping up and down. Xiaohai finally let out a genuine, brilliant smile. Seeing them back to their lively selves made everything worth it. This was why I was working so hard, to keep those smiles on their faces. After dropping them off, I made my way to Class 6 at Star City First High School. As soon as I walked in, my friend Chinlin grabbed me and pulled me into my seat. So, Suhong, have you thought about it? Are we going to the underground matches tonight to watch? I'm not going, I said, shaking my head. Are you serious? Chinlin's eyes widened. You're going to miss the big fight? Are you sure you won't regret it? I'm not going to watch, I thought to myself. I'm going to fight. I didn't tell him, though. If I did, he'd try to stop me or tell my aunt and uncle, and that would just cause more trouble. Everyone quiet down, our homeroom teacher, Li Ming, shouted as he walked in. Everyone head to the gymnasium immediately. The class was stunned. Teacher, what about morning self-study? Li Ming laughed. You can stay for study if you want, but the principal has invited a rank 3 martial artist to teach everyone a C-grade martial technique. You sure you want to miss that? A rank 3 teacher? A C-grade technique? The students didn't need another word. They bolted for the gym faster than they usually ran to the cafeteria at lunchtime. My eyes lit up too. I wasn't afraid of difficult techniques. I was afraid of not having enough of them. A C-grade technique. Holy crap, Chun Lin shouted, pumping his fist as he ran beside me. If I learn this, I'll dominate the monthly exams. Heck, I might even be brave enough to step into the underground ring myself. I looked at him, genuinely shocked. Lin blinked, then punched my arm. What? You don't believe me? Then he sighed, his shoulders sagging. Fine, even if I learn it, I'm not going. Those guys play for keeps. Most of them have mastered their techniques to the great success stage. I'd just be a snack for them. He shifted his gaze to me and patted my shoulder like an old man. But you, Su-hong, I have high hopes for you. When your Vajra fist reaches the perfect stage, you go fight. I'll place the bets, and we'll split the winnings 50-50. We'll be rich. He started laughing at his own joke. Pretty funny, right? I gave him a thumbs up. Hilarious. Meanwhile, at the school gate, Principal Li Chengshan was waiting. A few minutes later, a black sedan pulled up and a fit, middle-aged man stepped out. Chen Tian, I had to beg my old comrade to come here, and you still took your sweet time, Li Chengshan teased. I took a taxi here myself, and you're complaining? Chen Tian barked back, grinning. I should have stayed at the hotel until you sent a literal carriage to pick me up. The two men laughed and bumped fists. They had been brothers in arms years ago, and today, Chen Tian was here to show my classmates what a real warrior looked like. The man who stepped out of the sedan wasn't just some middle-aged traveler. He was Chen Tian, the rank 3 martial artist my principal had invited to teach us. His strength was actually a level higher than Principal Li Chengshan's. Let's go, Li Chengshan said, grabbing Chen Tian's arm and pulling him toward the gym. The students are already gathered. We're just waiting for you. Chen Tian looked speechless. Are you serious? You're treating me like a pack mule. I traveled all this way, and you won't even give me a cup of tea? Is this how you treat guests? Tea? Of course I have tea, Li Chengshan replied. He reached into his bag and pulled out 2 plastic bottles. I've got iced red tea and iced green tea. Which one do you want? Chen Tian stared at him, then gave a slow thumbs up. You're something else, Li Chengshan. You really call bottled iced tea tea? Unbelievable. Do you want it or not? Give me that, Chen Tian grumbled, snatching the red tea. He looked at the bottle and blinked. A 1-liter bottle? You're really going all out, aren't you? Li Chengshan just chuckled. Chen Tian flashed him a middle finger, but his expression turned serious as they walked. All right, let's talk business. How are your students? The principal sighed. Most are still just martial trainees. I only have about a dozen quasi-martial artists. As for rank 1 martial artists, only 2. And they just broke through recently. Chen Tian paused. That's it. Are there any students with a real talent for martial techniques? If there were, would I be sighing like this? Chen Tian looked annoyed. So there isn't a single decent prospect? And you called me here to teach a C-grade technique? Most of them won't even understand the basics. Do you think my thunderclap fist is common as dirt? With this student quality, maybe those 2 rank 1 kids will learn something. The quasi-martial artists might get a foot in the door if they're lucky. But for the trainees, learning a C-grade technique is a pipe dream. Li Chengshan looked defensive. I'm not asking you to teach the trainees. Focus on the rank 1s and the quasi-martial artists. I just brought everyone here because I believe in equal opportunity. Who knows? Maybe a genius is hiding among the trainees. Chen Tian shook his head. You're dreaming. We were all waiting in the gymnasium when they walked in. Every eye in the building locked onto them. Students, Li Chengshan shouted. Let's welcome rank 3 martial artist, Chen Tian. He's here to share his knowledge with you. Thunderous applause broke out. I joined in, standing with my class in the middle of the gym. My homeroom teacher, Li Ming, stood at the front of our group. The elite class occupied the very front row, closest to the stage. They had plenty of space to move and practice, a privilege the rest of us didn't have. We were packed in like sardines, forced to just watch and hope we could remember the movements later. I saw the students in the elite class puffing out their chests with pride. At the very front stood Li Tu and Shin Shan, the school's only 2 rank 1 martial artists. They looked calm, acting as if they were already masters. I won't waste your time, Chen Tian said, his voice carrying across the hall. Today, I'm teaching you the C-grade technique, Thunderclap Fist. I will demonstrate it 10 times. How much you learn depends entirely on you. He dropped into a stance. The gym went silent. Nobody wanted to miss a single detail. The elite class students immediately started mimicking his movements. Watch closely, Li Ming whispered to us. This is a rare opportunity. Even he was staring with wide eyes. As a rank 1 martial artist himself, this lesson was valuable for him too. Chen Tian began the form. His movements were fierce and domineering. The thunderclap fist is about explosive power, he explained while moving. When you reach the entry stage, your punch will produce a single crack of thunder. He threw a punch. A sharp boom echoed through the gym like a literal lightning strike. At the proficient stage, you can trigger 3 sounds, he continued. At the minute stage, 5. At the great success stage, which is where I am, you get 7. Suddenly, his speed doubled. Asterisk boom, boom, boom. Asterisk 7 consecutive blasts erupted from his fists, shaking the air. He pulled back into a standing position. If you ever reach the perfect stage, you'll hit 9 sounds. I haven't reached that level myself, so don't get ahead of yourselves. Just aim for the entry stage today. He glanced at the elite class. Li Tu and Qin Shan were doing their best to follow along, but their movements were hollow. They had the shape, but none of the power. Chen Tian didn't look surprised. 10 seconds to memorize what you saw. Then, I go again. Back in class 6, Chun Lin leaned toward me and whispered, "Holy crap, how are we supposed to learn this? It's way too hard. And it's so crowded in here, I can't even stretch my legs. I'll forget everything by the time I find space to practice. Right, Su-hong?" When I didn't answer, Chen Lin turned around. I wasn't there. Where did he go? He looked left and right, then hurried over to our teacher. "Mr. Li, Su-hong is gone." Li Ming blinked. He was just here. He scanned the crowd and caught a glimpse of my back disappearing through the gym's back exit. The teacher shook his head. He figured I had given up. He remembered me asking for more time to pay my school fees and assumed I had finally lost my spirit. "Let him go," Li Ming sighed. "You just focus on learning." Outside the back door, I stood in a quiet, empty clearing. I rubbed my chin, thinking back to Chen Tian's movements. C-grade martial arts. It doesn't seem that hard, I muttered to myself. I closed my eyes, visualizing the flow of power Chen Tian had demonstrated. I stepped forward and threw a punch. Boom. A single crack of thunder echoed in the empty air. A notification flashed in my mind. Thunderclap fist reached entry stage. I didn't stop. I was completely locked in. I adjusted my breathing, felt the weight of my stance, and launched a flurry of strikes. Asterisk pop, 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 asterisk. 3 distinct cracks of thunder followed. Thunderclap fist reached proficient stage. Back inside the gym, the atmosphere was tense. Li Tu and Qin Shan were silently competing, trying to outdo each other. Chen Tian had just finished his 7th demonstration. He walked over to the principal. "How is it?" Li Qingshan asked anxiously. "Not bad," Chen Tian said. Chen Shan and Li Tu have the best talent. They should be able to hit the entry stage by the end of the day. Li Qingshan let out a breath of relief. C-grade techniques were notoriously difficult. He had been prepared for the possibility that no one would learn it at all. He had no idea that a student he thought had given up was already miles ahead of the geniuses in the front row. Li Tu and Qin Shan were the best students in the school, and they didn't disappoint. But the principal, Li Qingshan, looked at the rest of the genius class with doubt. He asked Chen Tian if anyone else had a chance. Chen Tian just shook his head. It was too difficult. If even the top-tier students were struggling, the regular students didn't stand a chance. Li Qingshan sighed. He hoped this would at least motivate them, even if the talent pool was shallow this year. Inside the gym, Chen Tian began his final 3 demonstrations. He moved with precision, showing off the thunderclap fist one last time. As soon as he finished, Li Tu threw a punch. A sharp crack echoed through the hall. He had reached the entry stage. He was thrilled, his eyes darting to Qin Shan to see if he'd won their little rivalry. But a second later, another crack sounded. Qin Shan had reached it too. They stared each other down, competitive sparks flying. They felt like they were the only 2 people in the room that mattered. To the other students, the gap between them and these 2 felt like an ocean. They were all in the genius class, but they felt as ordinary as the kids in the regular classes. Meanwhile, I was still outside. My muscles burned, but I didn't stop. Boom, boom, boom. 5 thunderclaps rang out in quick succession. I had reached the mastery stage. I checked the time on my phone. It had only been 10 minutes. I realized then that C-grade martial arts were on a completely different level than the D or E-grade trash I was used to. I took a deep breath and dove back into the rhythm of the technique. Back in the gym, Chun Tian finished his 10th demo. Principal Li's face fell. Aside from the top two, nobody else had managed to learn a thing. Even the teachers from the regular classes looked embarrassed. They were supposed to be the mentors, yet they couldn't even keep up with two teenagers. My friend Chen Lin had already given up. He was just throwing half-hearted punches toward the back door, looking bored. He muttered that he should have just left with me instead of wasting his time. Our teacher, Li Ming, wanted to say something encouraging, but the reality was too depressing. He realized that the school really only had two true geniuses. Everyone else was just there to make them look good. Chen Tian was dripping with sweat. He told the principal that at least the two boys had learned it, so the trip wasn't a total waste. Li Qingshan tried to get him to give a closing speech, but Chen Tian was exhausted. He just wanted some fresh air. He walked out the back door, leaving the principal to give the students a generic pep talk. Outside, Chen Tian looked up at the sky. He thought about how cruel the path of martial arts was. Without talent or a massive stroke of luck, effort meant nothing. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw me. I was just a kid in a school uniform practicing in the clearing. He recognized the moves immediately. It was the thunderclap fist. He felt a bit of pity. He thought I was just some regular student who had rushed out to practice from memory. He knew how hard it was. Even the geniuses inside had to watch him 7 times while mimicking his every move just to reach the entry stage. To try and learn it alone, after the fact, was supposed to be impossible. He turned to leave, but then he heard it. Asterisk boom, boom, boom. Asterisk 7 thunderclaps roared through the air. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. He spun around, staring at my back. Then it happened again. 7 more cracks. I had reached the great success stage. Chen Tian's lips trembled. He couldn't believe it. He had just finished teaching the move, and a random student had already mastered it to this level. He didn't blink. He watched my movements, his confusion turning into a deep, trance-like focus. He was mesmerized. Suddenly, 9 thunderclaps exploded in the air. Perfect stage, a light bulb went off in Chun Tian's head. He slapped his thigh in excitement. He finally understood the missing piece he had been searching for. He didn't want to lose the inspiration, so he started practicing right there on the spot. 7 cracks. Then, with a burst of power, he hit an 8th crack. He had been stuck at the great success stage for years, and today, he finally broke through. He stood there, breathing heavily, feeling the new power in his limbs. Old Chun, you improved again, Principal Li shouted as he walked out. He looked suspicious. He accused Chen Tian of holding back during the demonstration earlier. Chen Tian was still dazed. He didn't even realize I had slipped away while he was practicing. He snapped at the principal, telling him he had no right to complain after paying him in cheap iced tea. But mid-argument, his face changed. He looked toward the clearing. It was empty. I was gone. The principal didn't notice his panic and tried to drag him to dinner. Chen Tian let out a frustrated scream. He was so angry at the interruption that he swung a punch, giving the principal a massive black eye. Li Qingshan yelped in pain, confused by the sudden violence. You said this school had no good prospects, Chen Tian hissed, his voice trembling. The principal just nodded blankly, having no idea that the greatest genius he had ever seen had just walked right past him. Don't you see the students? Principal Li Qingshan asked, sounding exasperated. The best talent we have is Qingshan or Li Tuesday. Chen Tian laughed, but there was no humor in it. A student just fired off 9 thunderclaps with the Benlei punch. You don't call that a good prospect? Li Qingshan snapped back. Chen Tian, you've lost your mind. Calling a monster like that a good prospect is an insult. Then he paused. His breathing hitched. His eyes went wide. Wait, what do you mean? You're serious? Chen Tian looked confused. You really didn't know? He quickly explained everything he had just seen. By the time he finished, the principal's legs went weak. He almost collapsed onto the floor. He stared up at the sky like he'd lost his mind. My school has a monster like that? How did I not know? Suddenly, he scrambled up. You said he was just in that clearing? Chen Tian nodded. With a loud bang, Li Qingshan exploded into motion. He moved so fast he left afterimages behind him. He sprinted to the clearing, eyes darting everywhere. He spotted a student in a school uniform walking toward the cafeteria. His eyes lit up. "Hey, student, wait," he shouted, rushing over. The boy turned around, looking completely lost. "What's your name?" the principal panted. "I'm Chin Lin," the boy said, blinking in confusion. "Quick, show me your Benlay punch. Right now." Chin Lin scratched his head. "Here? Now. Hurry up," the principal urged. Chin Lin took a stance. He tried his best to remember the moves and swung through a clumsy, crooked version of the technique. When he finished, he looked at the principal with a spark of hope. "How was it, sir? Did I do good?" He started getting excited. Why would the principal pick him out of everyone? Maybe he was a hidden martial arts genius and never knew it. Maybe the principal had finally seen his true potential. Li Chengshan stood there in a long, painful silence. He looked at Chun Lin's expectant face, opened his mouth, then closed it again. He couldn't bring himself to crush the kid's soul. "It was okay. Keep working hard," he muttered before turning on his heel and walking away. As he walked, the principal suddenly let out a long, manic laugh. "All teachers, meeting in my office. Right now." Chun Lin's heart nearly beat out of his chest. He watched the principal go, convinced he had just changed his life. He saw my punch and immediately called a staff meeting. "It's obvious. I'm a genius." Chin Tian, who was walking nearby, felt his lip twitch. He wanted to say something, but he kept his mouth shut. It felt too cruel to break the poor kid's delusion. 5 minutes later, every teacher, including my homeroom teacher, Li Ming, was packed into the office. "I want the names of every student who left the gymnasium early," the principal barked. The teachers looked at each other, worried. Li Ming hesitated. He thought about me. He knew I was struggling, and he didn't want to get me in trouble. "Sir, are you going to punish them?" "Punish them?" the principal shouted. "I'm thrilled. We have a monster in this school. 9 thunderclaps. The Benlay punch." The room went dead silent. The teachers' hearts skipped a beat. 9 thunderclaps? Even the top students, Chun Shan and Li Tu, had barely learned the basics after 10 demonstrations. Li Ming gasped in shock, but he felt a wave of relief. If it wasn't a punishment, then it didn't matter. "Let's start with you," the principal said, pointing at Li Ming. "Anyone leave early from your class?" "Just one," Li Ming said. "Su Hong." The principal's eyes gleamed. "Su Hong? Has he been acting strange lately? Is he the quiet type? Someone who doesn't like to show off?" Li Ming thought about it. "He's definitely steady and mature. As for strange, well, he's been stressed about the $3,000 exam fee. He asked if he could pay it a few days late. He seemed pretty down." The principal's excitement died instantly. His face soured. A genius who could master the Benlay punch in minutes wouldn't be crying over $3,000. With that kind of talent, he could make that much in a single night at the underground fights. "Next," the principal sighed, pointing to another teacher. Then he looked back at Li Ming. "About that Su Hong kid. Give him the extension on the fee. I'll approve it." "Thank you, principal," Li Ming said. Meanwhile, I was in the cafeteria, shoveling food into my mouth while staring at my system panel. My stats were climbing. My Benlay punch had reached the perfect stage. Now, I needed martial points. I asked the system if defeating opponents in the underground ring would earn me points. The answer was yes. That settled it. I ate faster, fueling up for the night ahead. Back in the classroom, Chun Lin was staring at the door. "Strange," he muttered. "Why haven't they called me yet?" He couldn't understand why the principal hadn't summoned him to the office after such a big meeting. He turned to me. "Su Hong, you sure you don't want to go to the fights tonight? Chun Shan and the other top-tier guys are going to watch." "I'm sure," I said. The bell rang. I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the room before he could say another word. 2 hours later, night fell. I stood in front of a massive, dark building. The basement held the underground arena. The entrance was crawling with people. I had already changed my clothes and pulled a mask over my face. I told the guard I was there to fight. He let me through. The elevator doors opened to a wall of heat, heavy metal music, and neon lights. The place smelled like sweat and expensive perfume. Women in skimpy outfits served drinks to rowdy martial artists. I hated the noise, but I kept my head down and found the registration desk. A board listed the prize money. Apprentice level, $1,000 per win. Trainee level, $5,000 per win. Rank 1 martial artist, $10,000 per win. There was also a $30,000 bonus for winning the apprentice tournament. There were 40 people signed up. That meant about 6 or 7 fights to hit the jackpot. I stared at the numbers. The exam fee was $30,000. Rent was $8,000. Then there were school fees for my siblings and the hospital bills for my aunt. It's not enough, I whispered. A woman at the desk laughed. She was beautiful, with a sharp, charming smile. You sound pretty young, kid. You've got a big mouth for someone your size. If you think you can actually win the whole thing, you can choose Defender mode, the woman said, leaning back. One person fights everyone until the end. I felt a spark of interest. Defender mode? She blinked, looking me over again. She probably thought I was just some arrogant kid with big dreams, but when she saw I was serious, her expression shifted. Exactly. If you beat every single opponent in the bracket, the final prize money doubles. But there's a catch. You lose the $1,000 bonus for individual wins. It's all or nothing. If you lose halfway through, you walk away with zero. Not a single cent. You still want in? I didn't hesitate. I nodded. She shrugged and handed me a contestant badge. Go get your blood chi tested, over to the left. I started to walk away, but then I stopped and pointed toward the testing station. A rank 1 martial artist had just finished his test, and I noticed something. Wait, why is his badge exactly the same as mine? Oh, that? She laughed. Every contestant gets the same badge, no difference. I frowned, but doesn't that mean? I know what you're thinking, she interrupted with a smirk. High-level martial artists aren't allowed to downgrade and bully people in the apprentice rings. But for an apprentice? Well, if you want to jump into the rank 1 or rank 2 rings and you aren't afraid of dying, that's your business. We won't stop you. I nodded thoughtfully and went to join the line for the blood chi test. The woman watched me go, her eyes flickering with a calculating look. She signaled a nearby staff member. Go place a bet for me, she whispered. Bet against this kid. Is he that weak, Sister Wong? The man asked. Use your brain, she snapped. His voice is young, and he doesn't even know the basic rules. He's clearly a high school student here for the first time. It's free money. Why wouldn't I take it? Damn, so he's a guaranteed loser? I'm in. I'll bet 3 months' salary against him. I stepped up to the machine. The needle hissed. Blood chi, 85, the monitor flashed. A staff member walked over. Follow me to the locker room. He saw me looking around and added, a lot of fighters prefer to keep their identities secret. We provide masks and headgear. Convenient, I muttered. In the locker room, I scanned the wall of masks. My eyes landed on a full-head latex bull mask with 2 large, curved horns. It looked ridiculous, but it covered everything. I pulled it on, checked my vision, and shook my head to make sure the horns were secure. Then, I walked into the apprentice waiting area. The room was chaos. A group of fighters was gathered around a power testing machine, shouting and cheering as people took turns hitting it. I counted 50 people, including myself. Their power levels were hovering between 1,000 and 1,200. I was impressed. These guys hadn't even hit 90 blood chi yet, but their combat power was way above average. Usually, an apprentice sits around 800. These guys were the elite of the underground. If I had come here yesterday with my basic Vajra fist, I would have been at the bottom of the food chain. But I wasn't the same person I was yesterday. The arena doors opened, and the fighters started filing toward the ring. I didn't wait. I surged forward, moving faster than the rest, and vaulted over the ropes into the center of the ring. I'm choosing Defender mode. I shouted, my voice echoing through the bull mask. The stadium went silent for a heartbeat. Then, the crowd exploded. Holy crap, Defender mode right out of the gate? Who is this bullhead guy? I've never seen him before. He looks like he means business. In the stands, I saw Chen Lin, Chen Shan, and Li Tu. They looked completely lost. What's Defender mode? Chen Lin asked someone nearby. When they explained it, his eyes went wide. 1 guy against 49? That's insane. Chen Lin pumped his fist, then sighed. Man, Su Hong, you really missed out tonight. If you heard about this tomorrow, you'd be too jealous to sleep. While the crowd was hyped, the other fighters in the waiting area were furious. Choosing Defender mode was a blatant insult. It was like telling everyone else they weren't even worth my time. I'll take you down. A middle-aged man jumped into the ring. He glared at me. Hey kid, first time here? You've got a big mouth for a... Bam. Before he could finish his sentence, I lashed out with a kick. He flew backward, cleared the ropes, and hit the concrete floor outside the ring. Next, I said. The man sat on the floor, looking dazed. He hadn't even seen me move. He patted his chest, realizing he wasn't actually hurt. He stood up and gave me a quick nod of thanks. He knew that if I had wanted to break his ribs, I could have. I gave him a small wave back. I was here for the money, not to start blood feuds. The audience was stunned. It wasn't often you saw a fighter get taken out before they even finished their trash talk. This bullhead has some skills, someone yelled. No wonder he chose defender mode. Suddenly, a loud laugh erupted from the rank 1 waiting area. A man wearing a white bearded mask jumped onto the adjacent professional ring. The kids are having all the fun. I'll take defender mode for the rank 1 ring too. The crowd went absolutely feral. It's Whitebeard. He's won 7 nights in a row. Tonight is going to be legendary. I ignored the noise next door. A notification popped up in my mind. Asterisk defeated apprentice-level opponent. Gained 3 martial points. Asterisk. 3 points? I wondered how many points I'd need to level up my blood chi. 1 win. The referee screamed into a megaphone. 48 fighters left. Will the bullman hold the line, or will a real master put him down? Let's find out. The fans were standing on their chairs, screaming for blood. I cleared my mind and looked at the remaining fighters below the ring. I beckoned with my hand. Next, a massive, muscular man jumped up. He grinned at me. Hey friend, thanks for going easy on my buddy just now. As a reward, I'll try not to break too many of your bones. He tensed his muscles, and his blood chi flared, radiating a heavy, aggressive pressure. This man was strong. His blood chi was only a hair's breadth away from reaching the professional rank. He was easily one of the most powerful apprentice fighters in the arena tonight. I didn't back down. I just gestured for him to come at me. Here I come, the big man roared. He covered the distance in 3 massive strides and launched a punch that tore through the air with a literal bang. I didn't dodge. I didn't parry. I raised my own fist and met his head on. The man's eyes widened. He hadn't expected me to have the guts to clash with him directly after he'd shown off his power. Thinking back to how I'd spared his friend, he actually tried to pull his punch at the last second, afraid of hurting me too badly. He made a mistake. My fist accelerated instantly. When our knuckles collided, the man's face went pale. He felt a surge of overwhelming force traveling up his arm. He tried to reclaim his strength, the veins on his neck bulging as he prepared to roar and go all out, but I was faster. I snapped a kick into his gut. Just like his friend, he flew backward off the ring. He landed hard, his backside hitting the exact same spot on the floor where his buddy had sat just moments ago. The ground was likely still warm. I lost, the man muttered, looking up at me in total shock. His blood chi was at 89 points. He was supposed to be the top dog here. He thought he could afford to show mercy, but I had outclassed him in both power and speed. He realized then that if I had been a cruel man, that kick would have shattered every rib in his chest. 2 wins, the referee shouted. Over the next few minutes, a dozen more fighters jumped onto the ring. I dismantled them all. I didn't even break a sweat. With my Vajra fist at the perfect realm, there was simply no one at the apprentice level who could touch me. 5 wins on the professional ring. A shout from the adjacent platform caught my attention. I looked over and saw the man in the white bearded mask. He looked completely calm, standing over his defeated opponent. As expected of Whitebeard, someone in the crowd whispered, "He's been the champion for 7 nights straight. I heard he's mastered a Tier 1 technique to the perfect realm," another added. "No other professional can match him." My eyes narrowed. A Tier 1 technique at the perfect realm? That was the same level as my Vajra fist. If that was all it took to dominate the professional ring, then I was exactly where I needed to be. Suddenly, a sharp whistling sound cut through the air behind me. I frowned and ducked instinctively. A heavy fist slammed into the space where my head had been a millisecond ago. I looked up to see a young man grinning at me. Fast reaction, he sneered. He didn't look embarrassed at all about attacking me from behind. My expression went cold. That punch was aimed at the base of my skull. If it had landed, I would be dead. "Holy crap, it's that shameless Lin Ping again," someone in the crowd yelled. "He won yesterday by backstabbing people. He even crippled a guy after the match was over just for fun. Is that even allowed? A newcomer asked. It's an underground fight, kid. Once you're on the stage, the fight is on. There are no rules. Lin Ping didn't care about the insults. He actually waved at the crowd as if they were cheering for him. He was a top-tier apprentice, but he preferred to play dirty. I didn't give him a second chance to talk. I moved. A blur of motion caught Lin Ping's eye. He saw me closing in and his face twisted in panic. He tried to dodge and throw a counterpunch at the same time. When our fists met, there was a sickening crunch. Lin Ping's hand deformed instantly, his bones shattering into dust. The force didn't stop there. It traveled up his arm, dislocating his elbow and forcing the radius bone to snap and pierce right through his skin. F. He collapsed to his knees, screaming in agony. I didn't stop. I walked toward him slowly. Wait, no, I surrendered. He tried to forfeit, his lips trembling with terror. He knew the next hit would kill him. But before he could finish the sentence, I reached out and grabbed his jaw, wrenching it out of place. His words turned into a muffled, gurgling mess. Please forgive me. He was sobbing now, his legs shaking as he tried to crawl toward the edge of the ring to escape. Keep waving, I said, my voice like ice. Don't you like sneak attacks? I didn't hesitate. I snapped a kick directly into his chest. His ribcage collapsed inward with a hollow thud. His body went limp instantly. The struggling stopped. I pulled my leg back and walked to the center of the ring. I wasn't a murderer by nature. I had spared the first two men because they were respectful. But Lin Ping had come for my life. If you try to kill me, don't expect to walk away. The arena went silent. The crowd was still processing how quickly the champion of yesterday had been turned into a corpse. Then, the silence broke. A roar of approval shook the building. Good kill. That bullhead is a beast. Lin Ping was a snake, but he was strong. He got crushed. In the corner of the stands, Chun Lin and the other students from my school were pale. Some of them were actually gagging. This was the reality of the martial world. It wasn't just training halls and medals. It was life and death. I stood there, feeling the changes in my body. My stomach felt a bit knotted. My hands were shaking slightly. I wasn't sure if it was adrenaline or the weight of what I'd just done. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I looked at the fighters waiting below. Next, I said, my voice echoing through the hall. The referee glanced at the body, then at me, and raised his megaphone. 3 wins for the defender. Seconds passed. No one moved. The fighters in the apprentice waiting room stayed silent, their faces full of shock and fear. The mercy I'd shown earlier was gone, replaced by a bloody display of power that had stripped away their courage. The fighters in the waiting room were shaken. They had seen Lin Ping's broken body carried away like a dead dog, and it had drained their resolve. They whispered among themselves, their voices trembling. They wondered if it was even worth going up there. One guy tried to act tough, claiming Lin Ping only died because he tried a sneak attack, but when the others told him to step up next, he shut his mouth and looked away. The referee called out again, asking if there were any more challengers. Silence. One by one, the apprentices shook their heads. They knew they weren't his match. They started turning around, heading for the exit. Within minutes, the apprentice waiting room was completely empty. The referee at my ring stared at the empty room, his eyes wide with disbelief. He only had 3 matches on his record for the night. How was he supposed to explain this to the organizers? The fans had paid for a full night of entertainment, and it had ended in minutes. Meanwhile, at the ring next to mine, the one for associate martial artists, the atmosphere was electric. A fighter named White Fox had just sent another opponent flying. The referee there screamed into his megaphone, "White Fox, 8 consecutive wins." My referee sighed, relieved that at least the other rings were still drawing a crowd. He turned back to the audience and announced my victory. The apprentice ring is closed. Our defender has successfully held his ground. Let's hear it for Bullhead. The crowd roared. I jumped down from the ring, ignoring the stares as I walked back toward the locker rooms. Impressive. I guess I really did misjudge you. I turned to see the woman from the registration desk. She was leaning against the wall, looking at me with a playful, seductive smile. She held out a thick stack of cash, 60,000 Blue Star coins. "Is it your job to hand out the prize money?" I asked. She blinked, surprised by the question. She shook the cash in her hand and laughed. Isn't it obvious? Keep it for now, I said calmly. I'll collect everything at once later. She froze, her smile fading into confusion. What do you mean? I didn't answer. I walked past her and headed straight for the door on the opposite side of the hall. Her eyes followed me, and then her jaw dropped. I was walking into the associate martial artist waiting room. She remembered what she'd told me earlier, that an apprentice could technically challenge the higher rank if they weren't afraid to die. She had meant it as a joke. She never thought I'd actually do it. Most apprentices have a blood chi around 80, while associates start at 90. It sounds like a small gap, but at 90, the physical body undergoes a massive surge in strength. An 89-point apprentice is worlds apart from a 90-point associate. To her, I was walking toward my own funeral. He's crazy, she muttered, shaking her head. Inside the associate waiting room, the fighters looked up. They recognized me as the champion from the lower ring. Most of them assumed I was just there to watch and learn, so they ignored me. On the main stage, White Fox had just finished his 13th win. The crowd was chanting his name. He was a 7-time champion, a legend in this underground circuit. The other associates in the room sighed, admitting they couldn't beat him. They were ready to call it a night. A bunch of losers. A cold, arrogant voice cut through the room. I looked over and saw a young man leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. He looked down at everyone with pure disdain. What are you looking at? He sneered. Am I wrong? I thought the fighters in Star City were supposed to be strong. If a guy like White Fox can get 13 wins here, this place is a joke. The local fighters flared with anger. You must be from out of town, one of them growled. Talk is cheap. If you think he's weak, go up there and prove it. The referee's voice echoed through the hall again. Any more challengers for White Fox? The arrogant youth, whose name was Li Ming, let out a sharp laugh. He started walking toward the ring. Watch closely, he tossed over his shoulder. I'll show you what a real martial artist looks like. He leaped onto the stage. White Fox, who had been waiting to be declared the final winner, narrowed his eyes. The crowd, thinking the show was over, suddenly surged with new energy. Please, White Fox said, giving a polite martial arts salute. Li Ming didn't return the gesture. He lunged forward and threw a punch. White Fox frowned, his expression turning cold as he raised his fist to counter. When their knuckles collided, a heavy thud echoed through the arena. White Fox's face went pale. The impact sent him stumbling back several steps before he could catch his balance. Oh, Li Ming smiled, looking unimpressed. You actually blocked one. I guess I underestimated you slightly. Let's see if you can handle this. He closed the distance instantly. He threw another punch, and this time, the air seemed to explode. 3 distinct cracks, like claps of thunder, rang out in rapid succession. White Fox didn't even have time to scream. He was blasted off his feet, coughing up blood as his body flew through the air like a rag doll. He crashed into the floor outside the ring, motionless. The arena went dead silent. Thunderclap punch. I heard Chen Lin and the other students gasp from the stands. We had just seen a demonstration of this technique at school that morning. But this was different. To produce 3 cracks meant he had reached the mastery level of the technique. Li Tu and Chen Shan, the top geniuses of our school, looked at each other with grim expressions. They had barely reached the entry level. And here was an associate martial artist who had mastered it. The crowd began to clap, though hesitantly. They were impressed by the power, but they didn't like the guy. He's a genius, someone whispered. To use a C-grade technique at that level while still an associate. Li Ming stood in the center of the ring, looking around at the audience with a sneer. Is this it? Is this the best Star City has to offer? Compared to my home in Sun City, you people are pathetic. The silence turned heavy. Everyone realized the truth. This guy hadn't come here to fight. He had come to humiliate us. He was here to trample on the reputation of our city's underground scene. The referees looked furious, but they couldn't intervene. It was a fair fight, even if the winner was an arrogant prick. The crowd stayed quiet, the insults stinging the pride of every person in the building. Someone had to step up, but after seeing White Fox get crushed, no one dared. Most of the people in the stands were locals from Star City. They couldn't stand watching some outsider come in and disrespect their home. The crowd erupted into a wave of curses and insults. Screw you, someone yelled. Who do you think you are, kid? Sun City fighters are just beggars coming to Star City for scraps, another shouted. Li Ming stood in the ring with his hands behind his back, a disdainful smile playing on his lips. Stop wasting your breath. Talk is cheap. If you've got the guts, send an associate martial artist up here to beat me. Over at the Rank 1 arena, a middle-aged man with a cold expression spoke up. Young man, don't be so arrogant. Li Ming glanced at him and laughed. What? You want a piece of me too? If a Rank 1 martial artist wants to step down and fight me, go ahead. The audience exploded with rage. A mere associate from Sun City was trashing the place. If a Rank 1 fighter actually stepped in, it would be a total embarrassment. A seasoned pro bullying a kid. But if that Rank 1 fighter somehow lost, the city's reputation would be buried forever. In the waiting area, the other associate martial artists looked grim. They knew they were outmatched. If they couldn't even beat White Fox, they didn't stand a chance against this monster. Excuse me, let me through. A voice came from behind them. The fighters turned around, stunned. A guy wearing a Minotaur mask was signaling for them to move. Isn't that the champion from the martial trainee ring? Someone whispered. Hey, kid, don't get swept up in the heat of the moment. You're just a trainee. Going up there is suicide. I didn't listen. I leaped over the barrier and walked straight toward the arena entrance. The other fighters stared at me with wide eyes. They couldn't believe I actually had the nerve to step up. On the stage, Li Ming was turning toward the professional rings when he caught a movement out of the corner of his eye. He raised an eyebrow as I jumped onto the platform. The crowd started to cheer, thinking another associate had finally stepped up. Kill him. Go. Wait, is that the Minotaur? The cheering died down instantly. People realized I was the same guy who had just won the trainee matches. What is he doing? Someone muttered. Is he crazy? I ignored the confusion. I looked Li Ming in the eye and curled my finger, gesturing for him to come at me. The silence was deafening. A martial trainee was challenging an associate who had just crushed a top-tier opponent. He's lost his mind, a voice cried out. He thinks winning a few amateur matches makes him a god. Li Ming is going to kill him. Even the school geniuses, Chun Shan and Li Tu, were watching from the stands. This is insane, Chun Shan said. Li Ming has mastered the thunderclap punch. Even a regular punch from him would break a trainee's ribs. Li Tu shook his head. Forget being a trainee. Even as Rank 1 martial artists, we might struggle against that guy. This is going to be a massacre. Chen Lin was vibrating with excitement, but then he sighed. Man, Su Hong, you really missed out tonight. You should be seeing this. The referee looked at me, his eyes filled with worry. He thought I was being reckless, but he respected the fact that I was the only one brave enough to step up when the actual associates were hiding. He moved closer, deciding he would intervene the second things got ugly to keep me from getting killed. Li Ming narrowed his eyes. He felt insulted. A lowly trainee thought he was worthy of a challenge? You have a death wish, Li Ming spat. He didn't even bother using a technique. He just threw a heavy, straight punch, confident that raw power alone would end this. I didn't back away. I stepped forward and met his fist with my own. Our knuckles collided. Li Ming's eyes widened. His body shook, and he was forced back a full step. I was pushed back 3 steps before I stabilized. The entire arena went dead silent. People's eyes nearly popped out of their heads. Li Ming, the guy who handled White Fox like a toy, had been pushed back by a trainee. No way, Chen Shan gasped. He blocked it. That trainee is a freak, Li Tu muttered, his jaw dropping. Even Chen Lin was scratching his head. If that were me, I'd be flying through the wall right now. I shook out my hand and looked at Li Ming. You're pretty strong, I said. To me, it was a genuine compliment. To Li Ming, it was the ultimate insult. His face turned purple with rage. His blood chi exploded, and the air around him began to vibrate. Asterisk crack, 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 asterisk. 3 thunderclaps echoed through the hall. He was going all out with his thunderclap punch. The referee tensed up, ready to dive in and save me. Then, a different sound filled the room. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk. It didn't stop at 3. It kept going. 4, 5, 6, all the way to 9. 9 thunderclaps. Li Ming froze. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He didn't even have time to react before my fist buried itself in his chest. He sprayed a mouthful of blood and collapsed, unconscious, before he even hit the floor. The silence this time was absolute. The referee stood frozen like a statue. Then, the realization hit the crowd like a tidal wave. Holy crap, 9 rings. A trainee beat an associate. That's impossible. The stadium erupted into a roar of pure chaos. In the stands, Chun-Lin looked like he'd lost his mind. Li Tu and Chen Shan were trembling. 9 rings, Li Tu whispered, swallowing hard. That's the perfect realm of the thunderclap punch. He's just a trainee. How is that possible? The two of them looked at each other and laughed bitterly. They were called geniuses because they learned the move after seeing it 10 times. Compared to me, they felt like total failures. I turned to the stunned referee. I won. Does the prize money belong to me now? Ah, yes. The referee stammered, nodding quickly. Yes, as long as no other associate challenges you, the prize is yours. I turned my gaze toward the waiting area where the other associate martial artists were standing. They all took a collective step back, shaking their heads frantically. Fight a guy who had mastered a C-grade technique to the perfect realm? Not a chance. I declare the winner, the referee shouted. The challenger has successfully held the ring. The crowd went wild. Amidst the deafening cheers, I hopped off the stage and disappeared into the shadows. As I walked through the waiting area, the professional fighters instinctively parted like the Red Sea, giving me a wide, respectful berth. I walked past them without a word. They watched my back, whispering in awe about the monster that had just appeared out of nowhere. A mere trainee, beating an associate like he was disciplining a child. As I walked out of the arena, I saw Xiao Fu standing there like a statue, staring at me with wide, vacant eyes. I didn't say a word. I just held out my hand. The prize money, I said. She blinked, coming back to reality, and numbly handed me the stack of cash. I counted it right there. Every bill was accounted for. Satisfied, I turned to leave, but Xiao Fu suddenly grabbed my arm. I looked back, confused, only to see her eyes sparkling with an intensity one hadn't expected. She looked like she wanted to say something, but I didn't have time for a long goodbye. It was late. I slipped away into the night, feeling the weight of the money in my pocket. Martial arts was expensive, but man, the earning potential was insane. In just a few hours, I had made 160,000 Blue Star coins. That was nearly a full year's salary for my aunt and uncle. A wave of relief washed over me. My martial arts exam fee was covered. The rent was taken care of. I even had enough for my siblings' tuition next year. Most importantly, I had a head start on my aunt's medical bills. It might not cure her completely, but it would buy her the best treatments and medicine available. It was a start. I found a quiet spot and pulled up my system panel. Name, Su Hong. Talent, Eternal Peerless. Blood Chi, 85. Spirit, 23. Constitution, Mortal Body, 3%. Martial Arts, Thunderclap Punch, perfect. Vajra Punch, perfect. Floating Light Palm, perfect. Sky Step, perfect. Martial Points, 67. I had defeated 4 people tonight. Looking at the logs, most of those points came from that last guy. It seemed the stronger the opponent, the more points I earned. It probably scaled with their talent, too. I had points to burn, and I knew exactly where to put them. I looked at my blood chi. I wondered how far 67 points would take me. I focused my mind and tapped the plus sign next to blood chi. A prompt popped up asking how many points I wanted to use. I started small, using 1 point. I felt a sudden surge of heat rush through my veins. My body hummed. I checked the panel again. My blood chi had moved from 85 to 85.1. So 1.5 points equaled 0.1 blood chi. It seemed like a tiny gain, but I knew better. In the real world, increasing your blood chi by that much could take a week or even a month of grueling cultivation. I had 66.5 points left. If I dumped it all, I could actually break through to become an associate martial artist tonight. I hesitated for a second. Would my body explode if I did it all at once? I decided to test the waters. I added 2 points. No problem, so I added 5 points. Easy, 10 points. Still fine. When I dumped 20 points in one go, my skin began to feel tight. A sharp, stinging pain pricked at my muscles. I waited, breathing through the discomfort until my body adapted. Then, I pushed again. When my blood chi hit 90, something inside me snapped. A massive wave of energy erupted from my core. A visible shockwave rippled outward, catching the fallen leaves on the ground and sending them swirling into the air like a golden whirlwind. The turbulence lasted for a few seconds before settling back into my skin. I clenched my fists. The power coursing through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It was intoxicating. I was officially an associate martial artist. I licked my lips, savoring the sensation of my strengthened physical body. I didn't stop there. I poured every remaining point into blood chi until the tank was empty. My final stat sat at 91.7. I had gained 6.7 points in a single night. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Song Fei, Angry Thunder Gym. Before tonight, I survived by working part-time at this gym. I was a sparring partner. It paid 100 coins an hour, which sounded decent, but it was a brutal job. Sparring partner was just a polite way of saying human punching bag. Even with protective gear, I usually went home covered in bruises. I'd made an appointment days ago to help someone train tonight. I checked the time. It was almost 10. Suhong. Song Fei's voice came through as soon as I picked up. Where are you? You're late. On my way, I said. Hurry up. We're waiting. He hung up. I didn't really need the money anymore, but I wasn't the type to break a promise. I started walking toward the gym. 10 minutes into the walk, I passed an open-air martial arts field. My eyes lit up. I remembered this place. There was a grade 1 combat power tester here. I wanted to see exactly how much stronger I'd become. In a small guard shack nearby, a young security guard yawned. He was thrilled. For once, the martial artist had left early. He could finally get some sleep. Hopefully no geniuses show up in the middle of the night like yesterday, he muttered, climbing into bed. He felt a twinge of anxiety remembering the kid who had shattered the records the night before, but he shook it off. Lightning didn't strike twice. He drifted off, and soon, he was snoring. Boom. 9 consecutive thunderclaps exploded right outside his window. The sound was so loud it felt like a physical blow. The guard jumped out of his skin, his head slamming into the low ceiling with a sickening thud. Ow! Damn it! He crouched on the floor, clutching his throbbing head, tears pricking his eyes. Not again. Are you kidding me? He was furious. He threw on his jacket and stomped toward the door, ready to scream at whoever was making that noise. But as he got closer to the field, his pace slowed. His anger cooled into a cold sweat. What if it was that same genius from yesterday? He hesitated. No, that was impossible. People like that trained in elite schools or high-end private dojos. They didn't hang out at public fields 2 nights in a row. He reached the testing area and saw the screen of the machine glowing in the dark. He looked around. The field was empty. Not a soul in sight. Are you serious? He hissed. Hit the machine and run? What kind of psychopath does that? He grumbled under his breath as he walked toward the machine to shut it down. He was already rehearsing the insults he'd use if he ever caught the guy. Then, his eyes hit the screen. He froze, and his jaw dropped so far it looked like it might fall off. Combat Power, 2023. Holy, he whispered. He spun around, looking left and right like a paranoid thief. He needed to make sure the person who hit this wasn't still around to hear him complaining. Please tell me he didn't hear me. Please. He wiped a bead of cold sweat from his forehead and then, without warning, slapped himself hard across the face. Yesterday, he almost offended a genius. Today, he had almost cursed out a monster. He turned around and walked back to his shack in total silence, praying he'd never see that psychopath again. The sound of my hand hitting my own face rang out sharp and clear in the empty night air. I didn't care. I needed that sting to remind me how close I'd come to death. My combat power had officially broken the 2,000 mark. I nodded to myself, satisfied, as I walked away from the testing field. A short while later, I arrived at the gates of the wrathful Thunder Dojo. Song Fei was already there waiting for me. When he saw me, he waved me over with a grin. Come on, practice with me for a bit, he said, pulling me inside. I hired a martial arts instructor today. You can tag along and learn something. I raised an eyebrow. Song Fei looked proud of himself. Well, calling it just martial arts isn't quite right, he bragged. It's a C-grade spear technique. My eyes lit up. For an ordinary person, a weapon is a massive force multiplier. It's the same for martial artists, except we use high-grade alloy weapons. Techniques and weapons are ranked from F all the way to SSS. A C-grade spear technique was worth a fortune, and alloy weapons weren't cheap either. I'd been too broke to even think about it before, but now things were different. If I ran into an enemy with an alloy weapon and I was empty-handed, I'd be at a huge disadvantage. I followed Song Fei into the dojo. We walked into a training hall that was massive, at least 200 square meters. The walls were covered in floor-to-ceiling mirrors so students could watch their form. About a dozen other martial artists were already there. "Song Fei, you're late," one of them shouted. Song Fei's eyes went wide. "What? Did I miss it? Is it over?" "Not yet," the guy replied with a sigh. "But you've missed the last few days. Today is the final day of the C-grade spear training." Song Fei slumped his shoulders, looking like he wanted to punch himself. Damn it. If I'd started on day one, I might have actually learned the basics by now. The room went quiet. The other martial artists shared a bitter look. "Don't beat yourself up," one of them said. The instructor is a guy named Jiang Ming. He's a rank 3 martial artist. He only came here because he owed the dojo owner a favor. He doesn't actually care about teaching us. He just performs the moves a few times and leaves. He won't even give us pointers. Another guy laughed dryly. "We've been here for 6 days, and not a single one of us has even scratched the surface of the technique." Then he looked at me. "Who's this?" "This is my brother," Song Fei said. "I figured the more the merrier. Hope you guys don't mind." The group was friendly. They told me to make myself at home and offered to help me with any questions, even though they were struggling themselves. I thanked them, liking the vibe of the place. But the friendly atmosphere didn't last long. The door slammed open. A young man stumbled in, leaning against the wall for support. His clothes were stained with blood and his face was a mess of bruises, but he still had a look of pure arrogance on his face. "My teacher isn't a bad instructor," the newcomer spat. "You're all just slow. If you lack talent, don't go making excuses." The room turned cold. The martial artists glared at him. I just watched, a bit surprised. Who was this guy, and why was he acting like such a big shot? "Who's the prick?" Song Fei whispered to the guy next to him. "That's Li Ming," the guy whispered back. "He's the instructor's apprentice. He's always looking down on us local martial artists." "What are you whispering about?" Li Ming barked. "None of your business," someone snapped back. Li Ming sneered. "Pathetic." That set everyone off. "Oh, you're so successful, are you? Then why do you look like a stray dog that just got kicked down a flight of stairs?" Li Ming's face went purple. He looked like he wanted to kill the guy who said it, but he was clearly too injured to fight. He just let out a hateful huff and limped toward the second floor. Upstairs, in a private room, Jiang Ming stood by the window looking out at the city. His other apprentice, a bulky guy named Li Yin, walked in. "Teacher, Li Ming is back," Li Yin said. Jiang Ming frowned. "That boy. I brought you both here from Yang City to challenge the geniuses in the local high schools, not to waste time in underground fights. Those matches are beneath us." Jiang Ming was annoyed. Li Ming was a top-tier trainee. He knew the spear technique and had already mastered the C-grade Thunderbolt punch to a high level. Sending him into an underground ring was like sending a wolf into a sheep pen. Or so he thought. "Go get him," Jiang Ming ordered. "I need to teach him a lesson." Just then, Li Ming limped into the room. When Jiang Ming and Li Yin saw his state, their jaws hit the floor. "What happened?" Jiang Ming demanded. "Did you challenge a rank 1 martial artist?" Li Ming looked at his shoes, embarrassed. He didn't want to talk, but under his teacher's glare, he spilled everything. When he finished, Li Yin looked like he'd seen a ghost. "A student? With a perfect level Thunderbolt punch." Li Yin gasped. Jiang Ming's brow furrowed. "A genius like that wouldn't be fighting in a basement for pocket change. Are you lying to me?" "I swear, teacher, I'm telling the truth." Jiang Ming was speechless. It had taken his students months of training under a master to reach their level. To hear that a mere student had reached the perfect stage of a C-grade technique was almost impossible to swallow. He saw that Li Ming's confidence was shattered, so he tried to calm him down. "Don't compare yourself to a freak of nature like that," Jiang Ming said. "Just focus on healing. Once you're better, you and Li Yin will go to the high schools. Use those students as stepping stones to rebuild your confidence." Li Ming nodded, his eyes burning with a new ambition. He would get stronger. He would find that student who beat him and wipe away this humiliation. When do we go? Lian asked. In a few days, Jiang Ming replied. At the end of the month. But that's when the schools have their monthly exams, Lian noted. Li Ming gripped his fist tight. Isn't that perfect? All the geniuses will be there at once. We'll show them what real power looks like. So where do we start? Lian asked, his eyes flashing with a competitive hunger. Li Ming gave a confident smirk. If we're going to do this, we go for the best. We're heading straight for Xingqing High School No. 1. The sheer confidence in Li Ming's voice was infectious. Li Yin nodded vigorously, his earlier defeat seemingly forgotten. Seeing his two disciples regain their fighting spirit, Jiang Ming nodded in approval. He had been worried the loss at the underground ring would break them, but it seemed to have done the opposite. Prepare yourselves over the next few days, Jiang Ming commanded. No going out. No distractions. Understood. Yes, master, they shouted in unison. Good. I'm going to finish teaching that spear technique to the commoners. It's the last day of the session. Jiang Ming turned and walked out of the room, his expression shifting to one of mild annoyance. Once he was gone, Li Ming scoffed. I don't know what he's thinking. Why bother teaching those losers? It's been 6 days, and not a single one of them has even reached the entry level. Li Yin chuckled, shaking his head. What do you expect? They're just a bunch of crooked melons and split dates. Most of them are in their 30s or 40s. If they had any talent, they wouldn't be paying for group classes at a local gym. It's a waste of breath. Jiang Ming heard them as he walked down the hall. He didn't scold them because, honestly, he agreed. Teaching the Raging Sea Spear to these people was a fool's errand. It was a C-grade technique. Most of these guys struggled with F-grade basics. He was only doing this to pay back an old favor. After today, he was done. Inside the training hall, the atmosphere was tense. He's 30 minutes late, someone grumbled. Just because he's a rank 3 martial artist doesn't mean he can treat us like trash. Keep your voice down, another whispered. If he hears you, he'll just leave and we'll learn nothing. The heavy doors swung open. Jiang Ming walked in, a standard-issue long spear gripped in his hand. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look at us. What are you all sitting around for? He barked. Get your spears. The crowd flinched. The disrespect stung, but we all wanted that technique. We scrambled to the racks, grabbed our spears, and fell into line. I stood at the very back, my fingers wrapping around the cold wood of the shaft. Listen up, Jiang Ming said, his voice flat. Today is the final day. I'm going to demonstrate the Raging Sea Spear 3 times. After that, you're on your own. Pay attention. He didn't wait to see if we were ready. He just exploded into motion. The other students scrambled to mimic him, their movements clumsy and frantic. My friend Song Fei was waving his spear around like a wet noodle, trying to keep up. But I didn't move. I stood perfectly still, my eyes locked on Jiang Ming. To everyone else, he was a blur of steel. To me, it was like the world had slowed to a crawl. My mind analyzed every shift in his weight, every rotation of his wrist, every breath he took. My brain felt like it was on fire, processing the data at a terrifying speed. By the time he finished the first set, a notification chimed in my head. Raging Sea Spear, entry level. I blinked. It was actually easier to learn than the Thunderbolt Punch. Maybe because I already understood the flow of combat better now. Jiang Ming didn't pause. He went straight into the second repetition, then the third. He finished all 3 sets in under 9 minutes. That's it, he said, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. How much you've learned is up to your own luck. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving us in a cloud of dust. The room erupted in anger the second the door closed. Is he serious? 3 times? That's it. He didn't even look at us. He just wanted to get it over with. Song Fei looked like he wanted to cry. I didn't catch a single move. His spear was spinning like a damn wind-fire wheel. How am I supposed to copy that? He turned to me, looking for support. Right, Suhong? That was total garbage. I nodded slowly, looking at my status panel. Yeah, for a normal person, that's impossible to learn. But I wasn't exactly normal anymore. My panel showed Raging Sea Spear, micro-perception level. I had memorized everything, every nuance. All I needed was a little practice, and I'd hit the perfect stage. Hey, everyone, a middle-aged man called out. Since the teacher bailed, why don't we spar? We can share what we've learned over the last week. Song Fei, you and your friend should join in. Song Fei's face lit up. Sure, that would be great. I was about to decline. I had a lot to process, but then a thought hit me. Could I earn martial points from sparring with these guys? The man waved me over. Come on, kid. I'll go easy on you. I'll lower my blood chi so you can see my movements clearly. All right, I said, stepping forward and leveling my spear. Let's do it. Watch closely, the man said, lunging forward with a basic thrust. Clang. Before he could even finish the movement, I had flicked my wrist. My spear tip caught his, vibrating with a specific frequency I'd just learned from Jiangming. His weapon flew out of his hands and clattered across the floor. The man stood there, staring at his empty palms. He looked completely bewildered. What just happened? He didn't see it, but I felt like I had just performed a reflex. Sorry about that, I said, feeling a bit awkward. I reacted without thinking. Then, the chime rang in my head. Martial points +5. My heart leaped. It worked. I could farm points right here. Kid, the man said, picking up his spear with a look of pure shock. Have you practiced the spear before? No, I lied. This is my first time. Good heavens, then you're a genius. You saw it 3 times, and you've already reached the entry level? You just disarmed me like it was nothing. The other students crowded around us, their eyes wide. What happened? Did he really just pull that off? The middle-aged man started explaining, and suddenly, I was the center of attention. Wait, we've been here for 7 days and still can't hit the entry level, and you did it in 9 minutes? Hey, handsome, spar with me next. Me too. Teach me that flick. Song Fei stood on the sidelines, his jaw hitting the floor. He knew me as the quiet, average guy. Since when had I become a martial arts prodigy? I looked at the group of eager students rushing toward me and suppressed a grin. To them, this was a friendly exchange. To me, these were walking bags of martial points. One at a time, everyone, I said, raising my spear. One at a time. You defeated an opponent. Martial points +3. You defeated an opponent. Martial points +6. You defeated an opponent. Martial points +5. The notifications were a symphony in my head. By the time I had cycled through a dozen people, my total points had jumped to 35. I realized that now that I had officially broken through as a quasi-martial artist, my growth was accelerating. This waste of time class had turned into a gold mine. The points I earned for defeating quasi-martial artists were starting to drop. Now that my own level had risen, the system wasn't handing out rewards as generously as before. Holy crap, Su Hong, Song Fei said, walking over to pick up his fallen spear. He looked at me like I was a monster. Are you some kind of martial arts freak of nature? I don't know, I said with a shrug and a small smile. Maybe I just finally had a breakthrough. Song Fei gave me a massive thumbs up. Then, he looked a bit embarrassed and scratched his head. Hey, could you teach me a few moves? I nodded. Sure. The other practitioners saw this and immediately swarmed me. Handsome, teach us too, please. They looked at me with puppy dog eyes, even the middle-aged man who had tried to give me advice earlier. I couldn't really say no. I gestured for them to line up, and they scrambled into formation like obedient school children. I'll demonstrate it one more time, I told them, gripping the spear. I'll go slow. Try to follow my rhythm. I began the angry sea spear technique. The weapon moved like a swimming dragon, the air whistling as the spearhead cut through the space with terrifying momentum. Wait a second, someone whispered. This doesn't feel like just entry level. I've seen Jiang Ming's top disciple, Li Yin, practice this. His technique is at the mastery level, but Su Hong looks almost as good as him. Is he at the microcontrol level already? They watched, stunned, as my movements became more fluid with every second. They had spent 7 days watching Jiang Ming, but seeing me was different. It was clearer and more precise. Are you at microcontrol? One of them finally asked. Yeah, I replied calmly. I am. The crowd went silent for a heartbeat before exploding with excitement. To them, I was a certified genius. To me, it was just the system working its magic. By the 3rd time I finished the routine, my understanding of the spear had skyrocketed. I glanced at my mental panel. Angry Sea Spear, great mastery. The spear felt like an extension of my own arm. The power surging through me was intoxicating. The practitioners gathered around, peppering me with questions about their grip, their stance, and their thrusts. I answered them all. I focused most of my attention on Song Fei and the kind middle-aged man. I walked through the crowd, adjusting their shoulders and correcting their angles like a seasoned instructor. Honestly, I knew I was doing a better job than Jiangming. He didn't care about these people, but I understood the technique down to its very bones. Suddenly, a loud, whistling sound echoed through the gym. The middle-aged man had just thrust his spear, and the air roared like a crashing wave. He froze, then started screaming with joy. I did it. I hit the entry level. That was the spark. Everyone went into a frenzy, practicing like their lives depended on it. Soon, a second person broke through, then a third. Song Fei was the fourth. He thrust his spear, felt the power click, and stood there like a statue. When he finally snapped out of it, he pumped his fist. Damn, Suhong, you're a freaking god. If you don't become a martial arts teacher, it's a tragedy for the world. The others nodded vigorously. They had spent 7 days learning nothing from Jiangming, yet in 20 minutes, I had helped 4 people reach the entry level. By the time the 7th person broke through, I lowered my spear and wiped the sweat from my forehead. My time as Song Fei's sparring partner was up. He had paid me for a job, but he had also gone out of his way to get me into this class. I considered us even now. Is that it for today? One of the men asked, looking disappointed that the session was ending. As I turned to leave, the group blocked my path. Suhong, wait. Thank you for actually teaching us today. We know it's not much, but please, take this. I tried to refuse, but they were insistent. By the time I walked away, I had 50,000 blue star coins in my pocket. They told me my teaching was worth even more than that. What a genius. I heard them whispering behind me. Song Fei, you're close with him, right? Can you get him to come back? We'll pet. Song Fei watched me walk away and shook his head with a bitter smile. He was wealthier than the others and had seen more of the world. He knew exactly what I was. Forget it, guys. He reached microcontrol in a C-grade art in under an hour. A genius like that teaching us once was a stroke of luck. Don't push it. The group sighed, nodding in agreement. They felt like they had just woken up from a dream. He really is better than Jiangming, someone muttered. Who's better than my teacher? A cold voice snapped. The gym door swung open. Li Yan, Jiangming's disciple, walked in with a sneer. I heard you losers complaining again. My teacher spent 7 days on you, and not one of you has the talent to reach entry level. You have a lot of nerve blaming the instruction for your own stupidity. The practitioners didn't take it lying down this time. The instruction was the problem. Someone else just taught us for 30 minutes, and we made more progress than we did in a week. Li Yan's eyes flared with anger. Nonsense. What's going on? Jiang Ming himself walked in, his brow furrowed. He hadn't been trying hard, but he couldn't believe anyone in this small-town gym had a better grasp of the spear than he did. Li Yan pointed at the crowd and repeated their claims. Jiang Ming's face darkened with humiliation. Half an hour? Better than me, he hissed. Where is this person? I'd like to see this genius for myself. Would you like to hear what happens when Jiang Ming tries to hunt me down in Chapter 19? Jiang Ming paused, a cold, mocking sneer playing on his lips. Maybe this person doesn't even exist, he said. Song Fei frowned. He wasn't about to let his friend be insulted. He's my friend. He already paid and left. Jiang Ming laughed. It was a dismissive, arrogant sound. He glanced at Song Fei with total indifference. I'll admit, I wasn't being very serious with my teaching earlier. But a friend of a mere trainee practitioner? There's no way they could outdo me. The atmosphere in the gym shifted instantly. Every practitioner I had just taught felt the sting of that insult. Song Fei was the first to snap. He reached down, snatched a standard-issue long spear from the floor, and looked Jiang Ming dead in the eye. Watch closely, Song Fei growled. He began to perform the raging sea spear technique right there. As the sound of the whistling tide echoed through the room, Li Yan's pupils shrunk. He recognized that sound. Song Fei had actually learned it. Jiang Ming stood frozen. His eyes widened in disbelief, but he quickly tried to hide it behind a scowl. I haven't seen you here at all during the last 7 days, Jiang Ming said, his voice tight. That means this is your first time. If you reached entry level just by watching me practice 3 times, it just means you have decent natural talent. The other practitioners couldn't believe the shamelessness coming out of his mouth. You have the nerve to bring up those 3 times you practiced? one shouted. Who teaches a technique in 9 minutes and calls it a day? You say he's new, but what about us? We've been here the whole time. Jiang Ming sneered at the crowd. You lot? You're just too slow. Your comprehension is too poor to learn such a high-level martial art. That was the breaking point. The practitioners were fuming. Then open your eyes and see for yourself if we're as stupid as you say. They all grabbed spears. One after another, they began to execute the Raging Sea Spear technique. The sound of crashing waves filled the gymnasium. 6 more practitioners showed off an entry-level mastery. Jiang Ming and Li Yin were paralyzed. Counting Song Fei, that was 7 people. We followed you for 7 days and made 0 progress, Song Fei spat. This other person taught us for less than half an hour, and we all learned it. What do you have to say now? Jiang Ming's eye twitched. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Song Fei wasn't finished. And you look down on my friend? Let me tell you something. He's a trainee practitioner and a high school student. He had never even touched a spear before today. After watching your pathetic 3 demonstration routine, he didn't just learn it. He reached micro-control. Then he spent 30 minutes teaching us. That's the kind of person you're insulting. Jiang Ming's face turned pale. Impossible, he hissed. That's absolutely impossible. Song Fei didn't argue. He simply ran through the forms again, the sound of the tide proving him right. Jiang Ming fell into a stunned silence. The ironclad facts were staring him in the face. He couldn't deny it anymore. Feeling the weight of their victory, Song Fei and the others snorted in contempt and walked out of the training room, leaving Jiang Ming standing there alone. A trainee who never touched a spear, reaching micro-control in one night? Jiang Ming muttered to himself after a long silence. How can such a monster exist? Li Yin was just as shocked. He had been praised as a genius by Jiang Ming because it took him only 2 days to reach entry level. Hearing that a high schooler did it in an hour and reached a higher level made his blood run cold. Teacher, Li Yin whispered. Song Fei said that genius is a student. Jiang Ming's brows furrowed deeply. He searched his memory for every famous young genius in the city, but none of them fit the description. Forget it, Jiang Ming said, patting Li Yan's shoulder. If he really is a student, you'll run into him when you go to challenge the high schools later. Don't worry too much. Song Fei was probably exaggerating. Half an hour to reach micro-control? Even the geniuses in the capital aren't that fast. He's likely been practicing in secret for a long time. He looked at his disciple seriously. Just focus on your training. With your Raging Sea technique at great success and your Stage 1 mid-rank blood chi, very few students in this city can stand against you. Meanwhile, I was walking home through the dim, yellow glow of the streetlights. I had just made another 50,000. Combined with my previous savings, I had 210,000 blue star coins in my bag. I felt the weight of the backpack and sighed with relief. Just a day ago, this kind of money was a dream. Now, the rent and my exam fees were covered. In this world of martial arts, strength really was everything. I looked at the bulging bag and thought about the front lines. Alien races were always watching our planet, waiting for a chance to invade. If they ever broke through, we would be slaughtered. I felt a new surge of determination. I never wanted to feel helpless again. I pulled up my system panel to check my progress. Name, Su Hong. Talent, eternal unparalleled. Blood chi, 91.7. Mental power, 23. Constitution, mortal body, 3%. Martial arts, Raging Sea Spear, great success. Thunder Fist, perfect. Vajra Fist, perfect. Floating Light Palm, perfect. Sky Step, perfect. Martial points, 35.5. My spear technique was only a great success because I had spent my time at the gym teaching others instead of practicing. Plus, I didn't even own a spear. I needed to save up for an alloy weapon soon. The spear felt right in my hands. I decided I'd stick with it. Now, I needed to focus on the most important thing, increasing my blood chi. Without a guidance technique, training was painfully slow. For a normal person, it could take weeks just to gain a single point of blood chi. Once I reached Stage 1, I could use a guidance technique to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. I couldn't do that yet. Spiritual energy is violent. If your body isn't strong enough to handle it, you'll literally explode. Hundreds of years of history and countless deaths had proven that you need at least 100 points of blood chi to survive the process. I needed to break through to stage 1 as fast as possible. I poured all 35.5 martial points into my blood chi. Instantly, a warm sensation flooded my limbs. My blood began to race through my veins like a rushing river. I stood there for several minutes, feeling the power settle. I checked the panel again. Blood chi, 95.2. I was only 4.8 points away from becoming a stage 1 martial artist. I was so close. My martial points were empty again, but for the first time, the future felt within my reach. I needed more martial points. I started thinking about where to get them next. The school organized a monthly exam every few months, and the next one was only 6 days away. All students had to participate in combat, and the top 10 performers received rewards from the school. I definitely planned to join, but I couldn't just sit around for 6 days. I needed to get stronger. I needed an alloy spear. As I walked past a small convenience store, a news report on the television caught my attention. The broadcaster was talking about the Star City wilderness. Apparently, the beast activity was increasing, and the city lord was calling for martial artists to hunt them down. The rewards were massive. My eyes lit up. Killing beasts would give me martial points and the money I needed for my weapon. Plus, I thought back to the underground ring, to the moment I killed Lin Ping. It was my first time taking a life, and I still felt a lingering unease in my gut. I needed to get used to the sight of blood. I made my decision. I would head into the wilderness tomorrow. Since the college entrance exams were close, the school allowed students to decide their own schedules. As long as I showed up for the monthly exam, I was fine. While I was planning my future, my uncle, Su Guoming, was walking home through our dilapidated neighborhood. The streetlights flickered as he dragged his exhausted body toward our building. He held his lower back, his face twisted in pain. He had strained it yesterday, but he'd spent all today hauling heavy cargo anyway. He couldn't afford to stop. He reached the stairs and sighed, looking up at the long climb ahead. He had asked his boss for a 1-month salary advance earlier that day, but the man had refused. Su Guoming felt a deep sense of powerlessness. He cursed under his breath, took a deep breath, and began the slow, painful climb. It took him 15 minutes just to reach the 5th floor. Before opening the door, he rubbed his face, forcing a smile so the kids wouldn't worry. Inside, Su Xiaohai and Su Xiaoming were in the cramped living room, their faces drenched in sweat as they practiced their horse stances. "Dad, you're back," they cheered. He nodded, feeling a mix of pride for them and anger at his own situation. My aunt, Chen walked out of the kitchen wearing an apron. When she saw him clutching his back, her expression shifted to pure heartache. She rushed over to help him sit. "It's nothing," he whispered, shaking his head. He told her quietly that the advance didn't go through. Her face fell, but she tried to stay strong. "We'll find another way," she said, turning to grab some medicinal ointment. Just then, the sound of a key turning in the lock echoed through the room. "I'm home," I called out. Su Guoming immediately grabbed Aunt Chen's arm and shook his head, signaling her to hide the medicine. He didn't want us to know how much he was struggling. I walked in with a wide grin on my face. "Brother," the two little ones shouted. My uncle and aunt suppressed their worries and forced smiles. "Xiaohong, why are you so happy today?" my uncle teased. "You look different. Don't tell me you've finally become a quasi-martial artist." He was just joking. He knew how hard it was to raise blood chi. I blinked, pretending to be shocked. "Uncle, how did you know?" The room went dead silent. Xiaohai and Xiaoming were so stunned they lost their balance and fell right onto their butts. "Brother, you're kidding, right?" Xiaohai asked, rubbing his backside. I looked at them seriously and nodded. "It's true. I've officially reached the level of a quasi-martial artist." "Whoa, brother, you're amazing." The two kids scrambled up and tackled me in a hug, their eyes full of worship. My uncle and aunt laughed, their joy genuine, but I saw the shadow behind my uncle's eyes. He had heard from coworkers that the martial arts exam fee was $30,000, due within a week. He thought I was hiding the burden from him. He resolved to go back and beg his boss again tomorrow. He would get that money somehow. "Wait, everyone, come here," I said, a mysterious smile playing on my lips. I led them to the dining table. "What is it?" my uncle asked. "Another surprise?" "A big one," I laughed. I swung my backpack onto the table and unzipped it. Then I started pouring. Stack after stack of crisp banknotes tumbled out. piling up until the table was nearly covered. 21 stacks. 210,000 blue star dollars. The entire family froze. Their minds went blank. For a family like ours, this much cash was something we had never seen in our entire lives. Xiao Hong, where did this come from? My uncle's voice trembled. He looked terrified that I had done something illegal. Don't worry, I said, telling a white lie. Once I broke through, the principal saw my potential. This is a special scholarship. I couldn't tell them about the underground fights. They'd never sleep again. Relief washed over them, followed by pure, overwhelming joy. Uncle, Auntie, you've worked so hard all these years, I said, my voice thick with pride. From now on, I'll take care of this family. Winning the championship felt good. Being praised by other martial artists felt great. But nothing compared to this moment right here. Good boy, Su Guoming choked out, unable to hide his tears. You're much better than your uncle. Auntie, you can focus on your treatment now. I'll earn the money, I told her. She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. That night, no one slept. My uncle and aunt stayed up talking, their voices filled with hope for the first time in years. And as for Xiaohai and Xiaoming, they wouldn't leave my side, peppering me with questions until the sun started to rise. For the first time, the weight on my shoulders didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a purpose. My uncle, Su Guoming, and my aunt, Shenlong, stayed up the entire night talking. I showed off a few of my new moves to the kids, and their cheers filled the house. By breakfast the next morning, my aunt and uncle tried to hand the money back to me. They told me I was at a critical point in my training and couldn't afford any distractions. I argued until I was blue in the face. Eventually, I took 50,000 and refused the rest. They kept pushing, so I did the only thing I could. I ran. I shouted over my shoulder that I'd be staying at school for a few days to focus on my cultivation and wouldn't be home. Outside, I took a deep breath of the morning air. The money still wasn't enough. If I had brought home 2 million instead of 200,000, they wouldn't have hesitated to keep it. I needed more. It was time to hunt. I caught a taxi to the warrior base 10 kilometers outside the city. Since the news broke yesterday, the place was packed. Everyone wanted a piece of the bounty. I stood in the massive crowd, watching hunters return. Some were alone, others in teams. Most were covered in blood. They carried bags filled with the left ears of monsters. That was the only proof the base accepted for payment. I looked at the giant screen in the center of the hall. Unranked monsters were worth 300. Rank 1 early stage were 1,000. The prices went up from there, reaching 5,000 for high stage. It was simple and direct. With my current strength, Rank 1 early stage monsters were the perfect target. 10 of them meant $10,000. That didn't even count the pelts or meat, but those were too heavy to carry. The ears were the real currency here. The line to enter the wilderness was long. Suddenly, a group of 5 pushed past everyone. A smug young man led them, his head held high. His name was Yi Feng. Even the rank 2 warriors in line stepped aside without a word. I heard people whispering after he passed. Apparently, his uncle, Yi Qi, was a rank 3 warrior and the head of this base. Typical. There's always someone with a powerful relative acting like they own the world. I didn't care. I just wanted to get moving. When it was finally my turn, the staff looked at me with surprise. I was young and alone. They didn't stop me, though. They just waved me through. I walked through the tunnel and stepped onto the soil of the wild. The air was sweet and fresh. I picked a direction and started walking. The outer forest was empty. I kept running into other hunters instead of monsters. Everything nearby had been cleared out by the crowds. I had to go deeper. I looked around to make sure I was alone, then I leaped into the air. I kicked off the atmosphere itself, my feet creating small sonic booms. I blurred through the trees like a phantom. 10 minutes later, I found my first target. It was a moon wolf, 2 meters long with fangs like silver sickles. A rank 1 early stage monster. It growled, green eyes locked onto me. It sensed my energy and decided I was the weakest prey it had seen all day. It lunged, aiming straight for my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't scared. I was excited. My hands trembled with a strange, dark thrill. As the wolf closed in, my mind went cold and clear. I dropped low, sliding under its belly. I didn't hesitate. I threw a punch. 9 thunderous cracks echoed through the forest. My fist tore a hole clean through the wolf's torso. It hit the ground with a heavy thud, dead before it could even whimper. I let out a long breath, the adrenaline still surging. Then the smell hit me. The wolf's blood was foul, absolutely disgusting. I gagged, held my breath, and ripped the left ear off the carcass. I stuffed it into my bag and kept moving. My body was reacting faster than I could think. It was like my instincts were finally waking up. I realized something important right then. My movements weren't just fast, they were automatic. The way I dodged and countered that wolf felt like a reflex I'd practiced for 1,000 years. It wasn't just that my talent made me smarter. It had completely maxed out my combat instincts. Back in the underground fights, I was so much stronger than my opponents that I never noticed. But here, against a wild beast, the difference was clear. I needed to test this again. I pushed deeper into the forest where the monsters were thicker. Before long, a massive shadow blocked my path. It was a raging black bear, a rank 1 mid-stage monster. It stood there like a small mountain of fur and muscle. I didn't run. I curled my fingers, beckoning it toward me. "Come on," the bear roared, the sound shaking the very leaves on the trees. It charged. I could feel the ground trembling under its weight. A massive paw swung toward my head with enough force to crush a boulder. I stepped back, the wind from the strike whistling past my nose. For 10 minutes, I played with it. The bear lunged, swiped, and bit, but it couldn't even touch the hem of my shirt. I wasn't even breathing hard, while the beast was huffing, its eyes bloodshot with frustration. My talent was terrifying. A mid-stage monster couldn't even lay a finger on me. "Test over," I muttered. The bear roared and raised its paw one last time. I stepped in. Boom. I threw a punch straight into its paw. The bear screamed as its bones shattered. Before it could process the pain, my second fist was already flying. It grew larger in the bear's vision until, crunch. I jumped back just in time to avoid the spray of brain matter. The bear's massive body slumped to the dirt, sending up a cloud of dust. I walked over, sliced off its left ear, and turned to leave. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air behind me. My instincts screamed. I dove to the side. A heavy spear slammed into the dirt exactly where I'd been standing a second ago. Fast reflexes, a voice remarked. A thin, wiry man stepped out from the shadows, pulling his spear from the ground. He pointed the tip at my throat. "Kid, hand over the ears you've collected, and I'll let you live." I stared at him, my face cold. "Instead of hunting monsters, you're hunting me?" He laughed, a nasty, mocking sound. "Hunting monsters is slow. Robbing people is fast. You've got 3 seconds to choose, the ears or your life." My eyes drifted to his weapon. It wasn't a standard wooden spear. "Is that an alloy spear?" I asked. He blinked, confused by the question. "Of course it is. Earth-grade alloy. Why am I even answering you? Time's up." He lunged, the spear blurring toward my throat. I didn't flinch. In my head, I was just thinking, Earth-grade? It'll have to do for now. Just as the tip was about to pierce my skin, I moved. To him, I must have been a blur. I swiped the spear from his numbed hands and delivered a crushing kick to his chest. He flew backward, smashing into an ancient tree with a sickening thud. He slumped to the ground, coughing up a mouthful of thick, dark blood. He looked at me, completely dazed. He had no idea what had just happened. I weighed the spear in my hand. It was balanced and incredibly tough, way better than the cheap junk I'd been using. "Not bad," I said, giving it a practice swing. The man swallowed hard, realizing he had picked the wrong target. "Look, kid, my mistake. Keep the spear. It's a gift. Just let me go." "A gift? That's very kind of you." I smiled. "Go ahead. Leave." He scrambled to his feet, forcing a fake smile as he turned his back to me. I could practically feel the hatred radiating off him. He was probably already planning to come back with his friends to kill me. I didn't give him the chance. I swung the spear like a whip. The sound of the air breaking was like a tidal wave. Before he could even turn around, the shaft slammed into his back, collapsing his chest instantly. He tumbled across the dirt, gasping for air. You said I could go," he wheezed, looking at me in disbelief. I walked up to him, the spear tip hovering over his heart. I gave him a bright, honest smile. I lied. I thrust the spear down. His eyes went dull, and his head hit the ground for the last time. I stood there for a moment, waiting for the guilt or the nausea to hit me. It didn't. The first time I killed, I felt sick. Now, nothing. I felt different. I opened his bag and whistled. There were over 20 monster ears inside. He was right about one thing. Robbery was definitely faster. I felt a bit bad for a second, then I shook it off. I wouldn't go out of my way to kill innocent people, but I wasn't going to let a snake live either. I checked my system. I had 38 martial points. Without hesitating, I dumped them all into my blood chi. My body surged with heat. My chi climbed from 95.2 to 99. I was only 1 point away from becoming a rank 1 martial artist. I couldn't wait. Once I broke through, I could finally start practicing advanced breathing techniques. I found a cave for the night and rolled a massive boulder over the entrance for safety. I started a small fire and looked at my screen again. I had earned another 32 points from the hunt. This is it. I pushed the points into my blood chi. 99, 100, 102.2. My body exploded with energy. My blood felt like a raging river, crashing through my veins. I felt like a furnace. My muscles bulged, the pressure so intense that my sleeves literally tore open, revealing arms mapped with thick, pulsing veins. I sat there, breathing through the heat, until the power finally settled deep into my bones. I wasn't just a student anymore. I was a rank 1 martial artist. My swollen, muscular frame slowly receded, returning to its usual lean, athletic shape. I was a rank 1 martial artist now. I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of power far greater than anything I'd ever known. That feeling, the rush of becoming stronger, was an addiction. No matter how many times I experienced it, I couldn't get enough. I spent the next 4 days deep in the forest. I didn't rest. I hunted. My sea rage spear technique reached the perfect realm during those 72 hours. Every time I thrust my spear, the air roared like a crashing tsunami. The power was devastating. I came across mid-tier rank 1 monsters, and with just a few strikes, I was shattering their spines instantly. By the end of the 4th day, I was a different person. My eyes were cold. My presence was sharp, like a blade unsheathed. The naive student who had walked into these woods was gone, replaced by a seasoned hunter drenched in the scent of blood. I crouched in the brush, my eyes locked on the most dangerous thing I'd encountered yet, a black jade python. It was dozens of meters long, a predator at the very top of the rank 1 food chain. It flicked its tongue, its golden eyes fixed on me. Suddenly, its massive tail whipped through the air. It was a blur of black scales. A boulder in its path didn't just break, it exploded into dust. I didn't try to block it. Only a fool would do that. I lunged upward, soaring over the strike. While in midair, I thrust my spear with everything I had. The tip found its mark, sinking deep into the python's left eye. Blood sprayed like a geyser. The beast let out a silent, agonizing scream and went into a frenzy, swinging its tail back at my head. I smirked. I ripped the spear out and danced backward. The python was so blinded by rage that its own tail slammed into its skull with a sickening thud. It lost its balance, swaying heavily to the side. That was my opening. I used my sky step technique to close the gap in an instant. I drove the spear into its other eye. I didn't linger. I retreated to a safe distance and watched as the now-blind monster thrashed against the empty air. Every time it slowed down, I'd dart in, land a fresh wound, and retreat before it could react. I wore it down, piece by piece, minute by minute. Finally, the massive tail went limp. I walked up and ended it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. It looked easy, but I knew the truth. If that tail had connected even once, I'd be a red smear on the grass. But between my 4 days of nonstop combat and my eternal unparalleled talent, my battle instincts had reached a terrifying level. I looked at the mountain of meat and frowned. This snake didn't have ears to collect for the exam. Then, I noticed a single scale on its forehead that glowed brighter than the rest. I tried to pierce it with my alloy spear, but the tip couldn't even leave a scratch. High-grade armor material, I realized. This was worth a fortune. I pried it off, along with a few regular scales to prove the kill, and stuffed them into my bag. My backpack was bulging. I'd killed so many monsters over the last few days I'd lost count, at least dozens. It was time to head back and settle the score. As I walked toward the edge of the forest, I passed other martial artists. I saw the greed in their eyes when they looked at my heavy pack. But then they looked at me, covered in dried gore, eyes cold and lethal, and they thought better of it. They knew a predator when they saw one. But then, a group of 5 blocked my path. They all had full packs, and leading them was a guy I recognized. Yifeng. I didn't want trouble, so I turned to take a different path. Stop right there. Yifeng barked. I didn't stop. I kept walking. He's just a kid, young Master Yi. Let me handle him. A burly man shouted, stepping out from the group. He wanted to impress Yifeng. Apparently, they'd spent the last few days robbing other students instead of actually hunting. Yifeng nodded. Go ahead. Don't kill him, just cripple him. The big man charged, closing the distance in seconds. He swung a massive fist at my back. I didn't even have to think. I spun on my heel, my spear flashing like lightning. The tip punched straight through his chest, piercing his heart. The man froze. He looked down at the spear in his chest, his throat bubbling with blood. He tried to speak, but only a wet, gargling sound came out. I ripped the spear free, and he collapsed into the dirt like a sack of stones. I paused for a second, looking at his bulging backpack full of monster ears. Finders keepers. I grabbed his bag and vanished into the thick trees before the rest of them could even blink. It happened so fast that Yifeng and his cronies stood there in stunned silence. He killed him? Just like that, one of them stammered. The dead man had been a mid-stage rank 1 martial artist. Yifeng's face turned a deep, angry purple. You dare kill my man and steal his loot? You're dead. He turned to the remaining 3. After him. Kill him. The 3 men hesitated. They were no stronger than the man I'd just gutted. They saw my speed. They saw my ruthlessness. And they knew that a kid this strong had to be a top genius from the academy. If they killed me, the school would hunt them to the ends of the earth. One of them stepped forward nervously. Young Master Yi, that kid, he might be a genius from Star City Academy, right? One of the men stammered. If we kill him, won't we? Yifeng cut him off with a look that could kill. The man shut his mouth instantly. So what if he's a genius? Yifeng sneered. We're in the wild. Once he's dead, we toss him into a monster's mouth. Who's going to find him? The 3 men looked at each other and nodded. The logic was grim, but it worked. After him, Yifeng barked. They took off, but after a few minutes of sprinting, their faces grew pale. No matter how hard they pushed, the gap between them and the boy was widening. He was too fast. Kid, Yifeng screamed at my receding back, his voice cracking with rage. I've seen your face. If you're smart, you'll drop that bag right now. Otherwise, his eyes burned with a murderous light. I'll kill your entire family. I stopped. I turned my head slowly, my eyes filled with a cold, savage fury. This guy tried to rob me. I defended myself, and now he was threatening my family. He was a dead man. I didn't say a word. I just memorized his face one last time, turned back around, and accelerated. I vanished into the dense foliage, leaving them eating my dust. Damn it. We lost him. Yifeng cursed, kicking a tree. The 3 martial artists stayed silent, terrified of his temper. After venting for a while, Yifeng turned toward the edge of the forest. Follow me. He took the bag, so he has to go back to the base to cash in. We'll wait for him at the entrance. One of the men looked at the darkening sky. Young Master Yi, it's almost night. The monsters get more aggressive. Maybe we should wait until tomorrow. Yifeng frowned. No. If he travels through the night, he'll slip past us. We move now. They had no choice but to follow. As they trekked through the dark, Yifeng didn't stop complaining. He cursed my name, my ancestors, and everything in between. The other 3 were just as annoyed. They were supposed to be having an easy time robbing students, but now they were forced into a dangerous night hike because of one kid. If I see him again, I'm gutting him first, one of them muttered. Don't get ahead of yourself, another grumbled. If that idiot earlier hadn't been so careless, we wouldn't be in this mess. They kept bickering, their voices loud in the quiet woods. Suddenly, a shadow exploded from the bushes. A spear flashed like a silver streak, punching through the heart of the man who had just spoken. Before the body even hit the ground, the shadow vanished back into the trees. It was too fast. It was a perfect ambush. Yifeng and the remaining two stood frozen. It wasn't until the wet thud of their comrade hitting the dirt echoed through the clearing that they realized what happened. "Damn it! It's him again!" Yifeng screamed, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and rage. He never expected me to stay. He thought I'd run for my life. Instead, I was hunting them. The two remaining guards felt the hair on their necks stand up. Their teammate had been alive a second ago. Now he was a corpse. "Faster! Get us out of here!" Yifeng hissed, swallowing hard. They stopped talking. They moved in a tight formation, eyes darting toward every rustle in the leaves. They felt like prey. Boom! A loud crash echoed from the left. The three of them jumped, weapons raised, hearts hammering against their ribs. They stared into the darkness for 10, 20 seconds. Nothing happened. I was playing with them. "I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him," Yifeng whispered, trying to convince himself. "Coward, stop hiding and fight like a man." "Right, brother," the man next to him whispered, his voice shaking. There was no answer. Yifeng and the last guard froze. A cold dread washed over them. They turned slowly. Thud! The third man was on the ground, blood pooling under his chest. Another one gone. "Damn it! Damn it!" Yifeng shrieked, his mind fraying. "Stop screaming," the last guard hissed, grabbing his arm. "We have to move. Now." They bolted, but they didn't get far. 10 paces ahead, a figure stood in the middle of the path. I was leaning on my spear, waiting quietly in the moonlight. Yifeng stopped, breathing heavily. Seeing me out in the open actually made him feel better. The unknown was scarier than the target. "You're done hiding, you little rat?" Yifeng spat, his voice dripping with malice. The last guard gripped his sword, making sure I didn't vanish again. I looked at them, my gaze as cold as the steel in my hand. "Just two of you left," I said softly. "I don't need to hide anymore." For someone who threatened my family, a quick death from the shadows was too good. "You think you've won?" Yifeng laughed manically. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." He lunged forward, and the guard followed. I didn't flinch. I met them head-on, my spear whistling through the air. I slammed my weapon against Yifeng's, the impact vibrating through my arms. Yifeng's expression changed. He groaned, his feet sliding back several inches. He was a late-stage rank 1, yet I had just pushed him back with raw strength. I didn't give him time to recover. I pivoted, swinging the spear in a wide, oppressive arc toward the guard. My movements were fluid and heavy. In a matter of seconds, I found an opening and drove the tip through the guard's throat. I ripped the spear out and flicked the blood off the tip. Yifeng's face was ashen. A few hours ago, he had a full squad. Now he was alone. "Your turn," I said, stepping toward him. "You think you've got me?" Yifeng sneered as I closed the distance. When I was only 3 meters away, he suddenly pointed a finger at me. A sharp, concentrated burst of energy shot toward my chest like a bullet. My instinct screamed. I twisted my body mid-air, feeling the wind of the projectile graze my skin. Boom! The energy hit a massive tree behind me, snapping the trunk in half like a dry twig. I narrowed my eyes. That wasn't a normal attack. Yifeng laughed, his confidence returning. "That's the void-piercing finger. My uncle, the base commander, taught it to me himself. Even though he had only mastered the basics, the power was far beyond any standard martial technique. It was his trump card. Most common martial artists never even saw a technique of this grade. If you kept hiding like a rat, I might have struggled," Yifeng barked, pointing his finger again. "But you walked right into your grave." He fired again and again. Streaks of white energy tore through the air, forcing me to dive and roll. I couldn't get close. "What's wrong, genius?" Yifeng mocked, seeing me pinned down. "A peasant is still a peasant. You can't handle real power." Yifeng didn't notice my eyes. Every time he fired a void-piercing finger, I watched his movements like a hawk. I analyzed the flow of his energy and the flick of his wrist. My mind raced, breaking down the technique in real time. A few minutes passed. Yifeng raised his hand again, sending another burst of energy toward me. This time, I pretended to stumble. I acted like my strength was failing, my reaction a half-beat too slow. "Die!" Yifeng yelled, a smirk spreading across his face. Then I moved. I dropped my spear and raised my own hand. I pointed a single finger back at him. A sharp, identical streak of energy exploded from my fingertip. The two projectiles collided in midair with a deafening boom, canceling each other out. Yifeng froze. His face twisted in pure, unadulterated shock. What? How is this possible? He couldn't believe it. He fired again, desperate to prove me wrong. I answered him instantly, firing back another void-piercing finger. As I did, I felt the technique clicking into place, my understanding deepening with every shot. Yifeng screamed in terror. You're learning this now? Right in front of me. He wasn't just shocked anymore. He was horrified. This was a B-grade martial technique. His uncle had spent a full month teaching him just to reach the basic entry level. His uncle had called him a genius for it. Yet here I was, a random kid, stealing the technique in the middle of a life-and-death struggle. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He realized he wasn't fighting a person. He was fighting a monster. I have to get out of here, he muttered, his shoulders shaking. He started backing away toward the edge of the forest, firing wild shots to keep me at bay. But I was faster. I pointed my finger and released a burst of energy far stronger than anything I'd fired before. It tore through his defense and slammed into his thigh. Yifeng collapsed, his leg pierced clean through. Proficient level, he gasped, his voice trembling with dread. He didn't even feel the pain yet. He just stared at me like I was a ghost. I had moved past the entry level. In a matter of minutes, I had surpassed his months of training. Yifeng stammered, seeing the killing intent in my eyes. He tried to speak, but I fired again. Another burst of energy punched through his other thigh, pinning him to the ground. You wouldn't dare kill me, he hissed through gritted teeth, sweat pouring down his face. My uncle will hunt you down. Wait, stop. I'll give you the manual. It's right here on me. You're a genius. I won't mess with you again. I looked down at him, my expression cold. If I kill you, it's mine anyway. He tried to open his mouth to plead one last time, but I didn't give him the chance. I fired several shots in quick succession. They pierced his forehead and his heart. He was dead before he hit the dirt. I didn't feel a shred of remorse. The moment he threatened my family, his fate was sealed. I was just glad I had been able to learn his technique. Otherwise, taking him down might have been a real headache. I moved quickly, searching the bodies. I wasn't the amateur I was on day one. My hands were steady and efficient. Within seconds, I found what I was looking for, the B-grade manual for the void-piercing finger. I felt a surge of excitement. Even with my talent, having the actual text would speed things up. I spent a moment flipping through the pages, then turned my attention to the loot. Yifeng's squad had been busy. They had 5 massive bags filled with monster ears. Each one was as heavy as my own. As dawn began to break, I walked through the forest outskirts carrying 6 bulging backpacks. A stray black bear leaped out from the brush, roaring and baring its claws. I didn't even reach for my spear. I just pointed a finger. A thick beam of white energy, as wide as a man's arm, punched a hole straight through the bear's heart. It dropped instantly. Perfected, I whispered. The power of a B-grade technique at the perfected level was incredible. I finally had a reliable mid-range attack. It was fast, deadly, and almost impossible to dodge. When the silhouette of the martial artist base appeared in the distance, I stopped. I looked at the manual in my hand. Yifeng's uncle was the head of this base, a rank 3 martial artist. If I was caught with this, I was dead. I didn't hesitate. I struck a spark and watched the manual burn until it was nothing but ash. I already had the knowledge in my head. The paper was just a liability. I shouldered the 6 bags and marched toward the base. The plaza was already crowded. It was the end of the hunt, and warriors were lining up to tally their scores. A well-known group called the Thunder Squad was at the front. 67 rank 1 low-tier beasts. 12 mid-tier. Total value, 230,000, the official announced. The crowd cheered, and the Thunder Squad members leaned back with smug grins. Holy crap, look at that! Someone suddenly shouted from the entrance. Everyone turned. I walked into the plaza, my clothes soaked in dried blood, looking like I'd crawled out of a meat grinder. But it wasn't my appearance that stopped them. It was the 6 massive, blood-stained bags piled on my back. Are those all monster ears? Someone whispered. 6 bags? How many did he kill? He looks like a high schooler, another added. And he's alone? The entire plaza went silent. Even the Thunder Squad looked stunned. They must be low-level scraps, someone muttered, trying to make sense of it. Even if they are, another retorted, look at the sheer volume. One kid did all that. Alone. I ignored the stares and kept walking straight toward the settlement desk. The skeptics in the crowd shut their mouths real quick. It didn't matter what rank the beasts were. Killing that many alone was insane. Most of the warriors watching still figured the bags were stuffed with low-tier scraps. After all, I was just one kid. The Thunder Squad had 5 grown men, and they'd only managed to fill 4 bags between them. I hauled my load to the settlement desk. A crowd of warriors swarmed around, their eyes burning with curiosity. Even the Thunder Squad, looking a bit sour that I'd stolen their spotlight, lingered nearby to watch. "Hello, you can leave the bags with me," the staff member said. His voice was unusually respectful. He actually stepped forward to help me unload, which made the surrounding warriors exchange surprised looks. This guy wasn't usually this helpful unless he was dealing with big shots like the Thunder Squad. He grabbed the first bag and tipped it over. Clatter! A mountain of monster ears spilled onto the floor. The crowd surged forward to get a better look. Berserk Black Bear, Shadow Wolf, someone gasped. Holy crap, these are all rank 1 beasts. I can't find a single unranked scrap in the pile. I'm stunned, another whispered. How can one person be this efficient? The warriors stared at the pile, their hearts starting to race as they looked at the 5 remaining bags. Was it possible? Could they all be rank 1? No way, a warrior muttered, swallowing hard. Before he could finish his thought, the staff member emptied the rest. Within seconds, the floor was completely covered in a sea of blood-stained ears. The silence that followed was heavy. I could almost hear their scalps tingling with shock. Unbelievable. Not a single low-level beast. All rank 1, someone noted. There's a ton of mid-tier ones here, and even a few high-tier. This kid is a straight-up genius. They looked at me like they were seeing a ghost. Suddenly, one warrior let out a frantic shout. Wait, is that a black jade python scale? The black jade python. It was the absolute peak of rank 1 monsters. The crowd froze, then turned their heads in unison. The staff member picked up the dark, shimmering scale, examined it for a moment, and nodded with a look of pure awe. Yes, this is definitely from a black jade python. The plaza erupted. That snake was a nightmare. Most of these guys would run the other way if they saw one. The Thunder Squad, who had been trying to act unimpressed, went dead silent. They'd encountered one once and nearly lost their entire team. Now, here was a teenager who had taken one down single-handedly. They looked at me like I was a monster. The staff member remembered something and looked up at me. The black jade python has a crystal-clear scale on its forehead. Did you bring that back too? I paused, then reached into my pocket and pulled out the unique scale. That's the one, he said, his voice rising with excitement. The base is authorized to buy these back at a premium. Are you selling? How much? I asked. He held up a single finger. 10,000 blue star coins. I blinked. A high-tier rank 1 ear was only worth 5,000. This one scale was worth double that. But considering how rare and dangerous those pythons were, it made sense. Deal, I said. Great. Let me finish the count and settle everything at once. He started tallying the ears. When he finally finished, he looked at me with a stunned expression. He cleared his throat to announce the final count. 72 low-tier rank 1 beasts. 83 mid-tier, 17 high-tier, plus the black jade python scale. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Your total is 416,000 blue star coins. The crowd went absolutely wild. 416,000? I couldn't make that much in 6 months. I'm a rank 1 low tier. At my pace, that would take me 2.5 years. Is this what a genius looks like? I'm convinced. They were floored. The Thunder Squad members just shook their heads. Any lingering desire to compete with me was gone. They had earned 230,000 with 5 people. I had earned nearly double that alone. The staff member processed the payment, and a moment later, my phone buzzed. I checked the screen. 416,000 had hit my account. I turned to leave, and the crowd instinctively parted to make a path for me. Then, a massive boom echoed through the plaza. A figure shattered a second-story window of the base headquarters and soared through the air, landing hard on the ground. "Nobody leaves," he roared. "Lock down the base. Don't let a single fly out of here." The plaza went dead silent. The man screaming was Yi Chi, the head of the base. The staff scrambled to block the exits. "Manager Yi, what happened?" someone asked cautiously. Yi Chi scanned the crowd, his eyes cold and filled with a murderous light. "My nephew, Yi Feng, has been murdered." The warriors gasped. Yi Feng was dead? Most of them struggled to hide the smirks forming on their faces. Yi Feng had spent the last few weeks robbing almost everyone in the wilderness. If it weren't for his uncle's position, someone would have killed him a long time ago. Internally, everyone was cheering, thinking good riddance. "Starting now, everyone gets searched," Yi Chi growled. "You don't leave until you're cleared." The crowd started grumbling. "A search? On what grounds? Just because your nephew died?" One brave soul muttered. Yi Chi's eyes flashed with killing intent. Yi Feng was carrying a B-grade martial manual. Whoever killed him definitely took it. "No one leaves until I find it." A B-grade manual? The crowd hissed. Yi Chi was truly filthy rich. But despite their annoyance, no one dared to speak up again. The man was on the verge of a total meltdown. If they resisted now, they'd be dead. The staff began the body searches. Yi Chi stood to the side like a hawk, watching every movement. Suddenly, his gaze drifted toward the settlement desk. He saw the mountains of monster ears piled there. "Who killed all of these?" Yi Chi asked coldly. Every head in the plaza turned toward me. Yi Chi's heavy, oppressive gaze followed. When he saw my young face, a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. He frowned, stepping closer to inspect me. "You're just a rank 1 low-tier warrior," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous chill. "How did you kill this many beasts?" He paused, his eyes narrowing into slits. "I think you're the one who killed my nephew. You killed them and stole their bags, didn't you?" Yi Chi's voice was like ice. "And then you had the nerve to walk back here and try to cash in. You've got guts." The other warriors in the plaza looked at me with pity. They thought I was a dead man. Yi Chi didn't wait for an answer. She waved a hand at one of her staff. "Search him." A man stepped toward me, but I didn't hesitate. I leveled my long spear right at his throat. He froze instantly, his eyes wide with terror. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. No one could believe I was actually resisting. "You dare refuse?" Yi Chi's face twisted with murderous rage. She started walking toward me, radiating a thick, suffocating pressure. Before she could speak, I looked her right in the eye. My face remained expressionless. "I am a student at Star City High School No. 1. That single sentence made her stop dead in her tracks. She looked at my youthful face, then glanced back at the mountain of monster ears I'd brought in. I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. She didn't care about offending the average warrior, but a student from a top school who could kill this many beasts? That was a genius in the making. If I grew up and came looking for revenge, she'd be in serious trouble. She stood there for a long time, weighing her options. Finally, her desire to find her nephew's killer won out, but her tone softened significantly. "My nephew was murdered," she said, her voice no longer cold. "I have to do this search, but I won't make you do it for nothing. Cooperate with me, give me some face, and I'll give you 10,000 blue star coins as compensation. What do you say?" I played the part of a disgruntled, arrogant student. I knit my brows and looked away, acting like I was deeply insulted. I stayed silent, pretending to weigh the offer. Yi Chi's eyes twitched. She held up 3 fingers. 30,000. I let out a slow, heavy sigh, acting like I was doing her a massive favor. "Fine. Deal." The search was quick and professional. The staff member eventually looked at Yi Chi and shook his head. "Nothing." "Fine. You're cleared. Go," Yi Chi said, waving me off. She signaled someone to transfer the 30,000 coins to my account. I didn't rush out. I took my time. I went to the showers, washed off the grime of the forest, and changed into a fresh set of clothes. I wanted to look like someone with a completely clear conscience. As I walked toward the base exit, I could feel Yi Chi's eyes on my back. Seeing how calm I was, calm enough to take a shower, she finally seemed to drop her suspicion. "Keep searching." I heard her scream behind me. "No one leaves until I'm satisfied." Once I stepped outside the base, my heart started thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. My face was calm, but inside, I was reeling. Thank God I was careful. If I hadn't burned that B-grade manual after memorizing it, I'd be a corpse right now. Most people would never destroy something that valuable before mastering it. But Yichi would never guess that in the few hours it took to walk back from the forest, I had already practiced that technique to perfection. I hailed a taxi and headed for the inner city. I was officially a rank 1 warrior now. My first stop had to be the Warrior Association to pass the official exam and get my hands on a cultivation guide. Plus, registered warriors got a monthly stipend. I needed that money. I leaned back in the taxi and pulled up my status panel. Name, Suhong. Talent, Eternal Peerless. Blood Chi, 103. Spirit, 23. Physique, Desolate Body, 6%. Martial Arts, Raging Sea Spear, Great Success. Thunderbolt Punch, Perfect. Vajra Punch, Perfect. Floating Light Palm, Perfect. Void Step, Perfect. Martial Points, 534. My blood chi had gone up by 0.8 points over the last 4 days. It made sense. I'd spent every waking hour in life or death battles. That kind of training beats a gym workout any day. Then I noticed something strange. My desolate body progress had jumped from 3% to 6%. I realized it must have happened when I broke through to rank 1. I felt a bit discouraged, though. A major realm breakthrough only gave me 3%. Without my system, reaching 100% would be impossible. No wonder special physiques were so rare. I wanted that body. I needed to know how many points it took to level it up. I also noticed my spirit hadn't budged. It looked like I had 0 natural talent for mental energy. I'd have to force that up with points too. I looked at my 534 martial points. It felt like a fortune. To reach the middle stage of rank 1, I needed 200 blood chi. If I dumped everything into blood chi, I'd be halfway there. But when I looked at spirit and physique, I realized 500 points wasn't nearly enough. I decided to test my theory. I put 1 point into my desolate body. The 6% ticked up to 6.1%. Instantly, I felt a small surge of strength. It was tiny, but it was real. This was the key. Blood chi was just a measurement of rank, but physique was actual combat power. I checked the math. To get 1% of progress, I needed 10 points. I checked spirit next. Same ratio, 10 to 1. To get my body to 100%, I'd need over 900 points. I didn't know how much spirit I needed to awaken mental powers, but I'd find out soon. I made my decision. Power first. I dumped 300 points directly into my desolate body. The progress bar shot from 6.1% to 36.1%. Suddenly, my entire body convulsed. It felt just like my breakthrough, but more intense. My muscles swelled, bulging against my clothes until the seams started to groan and pop. I transformed from a lean teenager into a mountain of raw muscle in seconds. My handsome, youthful face now sat atop a body that looked like it was carved from stone. It looked completely ridiculous. The taxi driver caught a glimpse of me in the rearview mirror and nearly drove off the road. He started shaking, his face turning pale. "Be big, brother," he stammered, his voice trembling. "Whatever I did wrong, I'm sorry. Just tell me, I'll fix it. Please don't hurt me." The guy was a pro, though. Even while terrified, he kept the car straight. I couldn't answer him. I was too busy feeling the raw, explosive power surging through my veins. I felt like I could take on the world. I didn't know exactly how strong I was now, but I knew one thing for sure. I could kill the old me a dozen times over without breaking a sweat. After a few moments, I started to adjust to my new state. The bulging muscles that had threatened to tear my clothes slowly settled, receding back into my frame. I transformed from a terrifying wall of meat back into a lean, handsome young man. I made a mental note to buy stretchier clothes. Otherwise, I was going to end up as a public nuisance the next time I powered up. I looked at the driver, who was still white-knuckled and trembling. "You okay?" I asked with an apologetic smile. "If you're okay, I'm okay," he gasped, letting out a massive breath of relief. He clearly thought he'd just avoided a trip to the hospital. I ignored the awkwardness and focused back on my stats. I had 534.5 points left. I dumped 200 into my blood chi, watching it jump from 103 to 123. Maybe it was because I'd upgraded my physique first, but I didn't feel any discomfort this time. The strength just layered itself into my bones. I took the remaining points and shoved them into spirit. It rose from 23.1 to 26.5. Instantly, my head cleared. The lingering exhaustion from days of hunting beasts in the wild vanished. I felt sharp, focused. The rest of the ride was quiet. We pulled up to a massive skyscraper in the city center, the Martial Arts Association. I paid the driver, hopped out, and headed straight for the front desk to ask about the Rank 1 certification exam. As I walked toward the testing area, I heard familiar voices behind me. Teacher, my talent isn't bad, right? Not only did my injuries heal, but I actually broke through to Rank 1. It's decent, a deeper voice replied. Just perform well today. Don't embarrass me. I glanced back. It was Li Ming and his teacher, Jiang Ming. They were heading the same way. I didn't linger. Li Ming's breakthrough had nothing to do with me. I turned and kept walking. Wait, Li Ming muttered, staring at my back. He frowned, looking puzzled. That guy's back? Why does he look so familiar? He thought about it for a second, but couldn't place me. He shook his head, dismissed the thought, and followed his teacher toward the registration desk. When they were told to head to the right for the exam, Jiang Ming froze. He watched me walking through the same door, and his eyes widened. A Rank 1 martial artist at that age? Jiang Ming whispered, clearly impressed. Li Ming, however, just shrugged. Teacher, I just started training late. If I'd started at his age, I'd be way ahead of him. He flashed a confident smile. Besides, martial arts is about combat power, not just age. Jiang Ming sighed. Having a talented student was a blessing, but Li Ming was becoming arrogant again. Ever since he'd been humbled at the underground fights, he had been quiet, but this breakthrough had brought back his old, cocky self. Jiang Ming wanted to use me as an example to teach him humility, but he knew Li Ming's thunderbolt punch was already at the mastery level. In terms of raw striking power, Li Ming really was hard to beat. Enough talk, Jiang Ming said. Go take the test. I reached the testing hall, and a staff member told me to wait. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes to rest while I scanned the room. Most of the people there were middle-aged men. They were all staring at me with a mix of shock and envy. To them, seeing a high schooler at a Rank 1 exam meant they were looking at a genius. Most of these guys had failed the test multiple times already. Then, Li Ming and Jiang Ming walked in. Li Ming saw me looking and let out a cold snort. He was still annoyed that his teacher had used me as a benchmark for real talent. He was dying to see if I'd actually pass. The proctor stepped forward. All right, listen up. The rules are simple. 2 parts, blood chi and combat strength. Rank 1 requires 100 points of blood chi. For combat strength, you get 3 punches. Your average must exceed 1,000. Let's begin. The middle-aged men went first. It was a struggle. Blood chi, 102. Combat strength, 992, 994, 1003. Average, 996. Failed. The room grew tense. These guys were barely scraping by. Li Ming watched them with pure disdain, while Jiang Ming remained expressionless. To them, this was just a formality. Jiang Ming glanced at me, wondering if I was actually prepared or just here to try my luck. Secretly, he hoped I'd outperform Li Ming just to knock his ego down a peg. But he doubted it. Could a random kid really beat a student he had personally trained? The group of older men finished. Out of a dozen, only 3 passed. They didn't leave, though. They huddled in the corner, whispering about us. The older one should pass. He's got a teacher with him, one whispered. The kid? He's probably just here for the experience. Even if he fails, being here at his age is impressive. Li Ming's face darkened. He hated being compared to me. He stepped up to the machine first, determined to shut everyone up. Blood chi, 105. Pass. He moved to the combat strength tester. He took a deep breath, his frame tensing. He threw a punch, and the air actually crackled, the sound of 3 distinct thunderclaps. The digital display blurred, the numbers spinning wildly before stopping. Combat strength, 1,763. The room went silent. Then, it exploded. Are you kidding me? 105 blood chi, and he hit 1,763. That's almost the level of a mid-stage rank 1. His technique must be C-grade at least. Total genius. The middle-aged men looked like they'd been slapped. They were in their 40s and couldn't even hit 1,000. Seeing a young man nearly double their power left them feeling completely defeated. Li Ming stood tall, basking in the shock, a smug grin plastered across his face. Li Ming's smug grin widened as he soaked in the praise. He wasn't finished yet. To drive the point home, he threw 2 more punches with everything he had. The machine flashed again, 1,721, then 1,690. The staff member finally snapped out of his trance and cleared his throat. Li Ming, you have passed the assessment. Li Ming walked back toward me, looking refreshed, his chest puffed out. He gave me a condescending smile. Your turn, he said, his voice dripping with false encouragement. The older martial artists in the corner shifted their gaze to me. These men weren't strong, but they were experienced enough to smell the tension in the air. They could tell Li Ming was trying to provoke me. I opened my eyes and stood up. I didn't give Li Ming a single glance. I walked straight past him toward the blood chi testing machine. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of annoyance at being ignored. He crossed his arms, waiting to watch me fail. Jiang Ming, his teacher, sighed and shook his head. He figured he'd have to find a real genius later to humble his student's ego. He wondered if any of the local high schools actually had someone who could give Li Ming a run for his money. Suddenly, a chorus of gasps erupted from the testing area. No way. Is the machine broken? How can his blood chi be that high? The older men were staring at the display, their eyes nearly popping out of their heads. Li Ming froze, his mind going completely blank. Jiang Ming frowned, confused by his student's reaction, and looked up at the screen. His pupils shrunk. The red numbers on the blood chi tester were glowing brightly. Blood chi, 123. Jiang Ming rubbed his eyes, convinced he was hallucinating. When the numbers didn't change, he looked at me. I stood there, perfectly calm, my face showing no emotion. He took a sharp breath. 123? That was nearly 20 points higher than Li Ming. Where did this kid come from? Li Ming's face turned a sickly shade of green. He remembered how he had just been acting like a big shot, and now he felt like a total clown. He tried to tell himself it didn't matter. Blood chi was just a number. Combat strength was what actually counted in a real fight. The staff member was speechless for a long time before he finally managed to shout it out. Blood chi test passed. Please proceed to the combat strength tester. Every eye in the room followed me as I stepped up to the heavy punching target. I looked at the black pad, feeling a surge of anticipation. After upgrading my physique, I really wanted to know what I was capable of. The test required 3 punches. For the first one, I decided to go pure physical, no martial arts, no special techniques. Just raw strength. I took a deep breath. I coiled my body slightly, tensing my muscles like a tiger ready to pounce. Then, I exploded. My fist slammed into the target with a deafening boom. The impact was so violent that the massive testing machine, weighing hundreds of pounds, was lifted off its base. It flew back dozens of feet, skidded across the floor, and tipped over with a heavy metallic crash. The room fell into a terrifying silence. Everyone was paralyzed. Jiang Ming stared at the overturned machine in disbelief. Li Ming looked like he'd seen a ghost. When he hit the machine, it hadn't even budged. I had sent the entire thing flying across the room. The staff member ran over, trembling, to pull the machine back up. He grabbed the frame and glanced at the screen. His body jerked as if he'd been electrocuted. He let go of the machine, and it slammed back onto the floor with a loud clang. He didn't even notice. He just stared at the display, his shoulders shaking. My God, is this real? He stammered. Move out of the way. Let us see. The other martial artists shouted, unable to contain their curiosity. The staff member stepped aside. Jiang Ming and Li Ming pushed forward to see the display. Combat strength, 1,862. The air felt thick. The older men started swearing under their breaths. 1,862? That's higher than the other kid's best hit. I thought that first guy was a genius, but this kid is a monster. Li Ming didn't even look angry anymore. He was just terrified. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. He had always called himself a prodigy, but standing next to me, he felt like nothing. He's stronger than Li Ming. Jiang Ming whispered, his voice full of shock. Then, one of the older men pointed a trembling finger at me. Wait, did you see that? He didn't use a technique. That was just a normal punch. The realization hit the room like a physical blow. Everyone replayed the movement in their heads. No special breathing, no crackling air, no martial arts form. Just a straight punch. A series of sharp gasps filled the room. If my raw strength was 1,862, what would happen if I actually used a skill? Jiang Ming felt a chill run down his spine. Li Ming's legs finally gave out, and he slumped to the floor, his eyes glazed over. First test complete, the staff member said, his voice now incredibly respectful. Please begin the second test. Everyone leaned in. They wanted to see the limit. I exhaled slowly. I was satisfied. My upgraded physique gave me a level of control and power that other martial artists couldn't even dream of. Most people couldn't change their innate physical strength, but I could. And this was only the beginning. Now, it was time to see my true maximum. I squared my shoulders and focused on the target. I didn't hold back. I channeled everything into a single point. Thunderbolt strike. A terrifying surge of energy exploded from my fist. The air screamed. The sound was so loud it felt like my ears were going to bleed. My fist connected, and the punching pad couldn't handle the pressure. It didn't just move, it disintegrated. The target literally exploded under the force of the strike. The crowd stood frozen, mouths agape. I had broken the testing equipment. I looked at the screen. The numbers were spinning so fast they were a blur. They blew past 2,000 in a heartbeat and kept climbing until they hit a number that seemed impossible. Combat strength, 3004. The number 3004 flashed on the screen, frozen and defiant. A rank 1 high-stage martial artist usually maxes out at 3,000. I was only at the early stage, yet my combat power was already rivaling the elites. The room went silent. Then, the explosion of noise hit me. Is that number real? Monster. He's an absolute monster. The group of middle-aged martial artists who had been testing with me looked like their faces were melting. Their expressions were twisted with a mix of shock and pure awe. They didn't just look at me anymore. They looked at me like I was a god. Jiang Ming had completely lost his cool. His voice went up 3 octaves, cracking as he spoke. Rank 1 early stage matching a high stage? What kind of talent is this? Does he have a special constitution? He swallowed hard. In top-tier cities like the Demon Capital, there were geniuses born with unique physical traits, special bodies that gave them terrifying power. These people were legends. They could crush anyone in their rank with a single blow. Seeing as I had surpassed Li Ming's score earlier without even using a skill, Jiang Ming was convinced I was one of them. He glanced over at Li Ming. He had originally wanted to find a talent to humble the kid and break his arrogance. But he hadn't expected to bring him face-to-face with a literal freak of nature. This wasn't a lesson anymore. This was the kind of soul-crushing defeat that could ruin a person's mind. Li Ming was still slumped on the floor, his eyes vacant. He stared at the screen like he'd seen a ghost. His soul had left his body. Jiang Ming's eye twitched. He walked over and slapped Li Ming across the face to snap him out of it. Wait up, Jiang Ming hissed. He's a monster with a special constitution. It's normal to be beneath him. Keep your head on straight. The monthly exams at Star City High are coming up. Focus on competing with the other students, not someone like this. On the other side of the room, the staff member was staring at the wreckage of the testing equipment. His mouth hung open. I don't have to pay for that, do I? I asked, feeling a bit awkward. I had been so focused on testing my limits that I forgot to check if the machine could actually take the hit. The staff member blinked, coming back to reality. No, of course not. The machine is broken, I noted. Do you need to fix it so I can do the third test? No need. He waved his hands frantically, shaking his head. You've passed. If we fix it and you hit it again, it'll just break twice. Please, just go to the next stage. I followed the staff toward the second floor to register my official status. Behind me, Li Ming was still sitting in the dirt, looking like a broken doll, while Jiang Ming tried to talk him back to sanity. The staff member was incredibly attentive to me, completely ignoring the older martial artists. They didn't mind, though. If they were in his shoes, they'd be sucking up to a genius like me, too. Meanwhile, in an office upstairs, Wu Linxian, the president of the Star City Martial Arts Association, was having a bad day. She scrolled through her phone, her brow furrowed with stress. People thought being a branch president was all glamour, but the pressure was suffocating. If Star City didn't produce some top-tier results this year, her career was over. The college entrance exams were looming. In the group chats, presidents from other cities were constantly bragging about their monsters and prodigies. Star City was ranked near the bottom of Jiangnan province. We had a few decent kids, but compared to the neighboring cities, we were falling behind. My time in this seat is done, she sighed, leaning back. A frantic knock at the door interrupted her. Come in, she called out lazily. A staff member burst in, gasping for air. What's the rush? Wu Linxian frowned. Calm down. Sit. Have some water. She poured a cup for the staffer and took a sip of her own. President, the staffer wheezed. A monster just showed up for the rank 1 assessment. Wu Linxian sprayed her water across the desk. She didn't even bother to wipe her mouth. She stood up so fast her chair flew back. A monster? Tell me everything. Now, the staffer blurted out the details. Rank 1 early stage. Raw physical power of 1,862. After using a martial technique? 3,004. Those bastards want me to step down? Wu Linxian muttered, a wild, manic grin spreading across her face. In their dreams. She let out a loud, booming laugh. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, she vanished. Boom! She didn't even use the door. She smashed right through the wall, leaving a human-shaped hole behind. Downstairs, I was heading to the registration desk when the air suddenly shifted. There was a blur of movement, and a tall, striking woman in her 30s appeared in front of me. President, you came down yourself? The staff member cried out in shock. Wu Linxian ignored everyone else. Her eyes locked onto me like a predator. Hello, she said, giving me a warm, intense smile. I'm Wu Linxian, the president of the Star City branch. I'm Su Hong, I replied, a bit taken aback by her sudden appearance. The older martial artist behind me whispered in envy. Most people were lucky to get a board clerk to sign their papers. I was getting the president herself. Su Hong, judging by your age, you're still in high school, she asked as she personally led me toward the registration terminal. Yes, I'm a student at Star City First High. Wu Linxian froze. First High? Li Qingshan, that old fox. She gritted her teeth. The principal had told her he only had 2 average, rank 1 students this year. He had been hiding a diamond in the rough. She made a mental note to punch him the next time they met. In less than a minute, my registration was complete. As a rank 1 martial artist, you'll receive a monthly stipend of 10,000 Blue Star coins, Wu Linxian explained. You also get free access to the guidance technique for cultivation. Follow me. I'll take you to the vault. My heart hammered against my ribs. 10,000 coins a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than my uncle and aunt made combined. I can finally tell uncle to quit that job and fire his boss, I thought. I followed her down the hall, ready to claim my prize. Wu Linxian didn't act like a high-ranking official at all. She was surprisingly gentle, speaking in a soft voice as she started explaining the basics of guidance techniques. She told me that cultivation wasn't just about absorbing generic energy. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was divided into different elements, and different techniques were designed to absorb specific ones. For example, she said, I practice the Sky Flame guidance technique. It focuses on fire elemental energy. Not only does it strengthen my body, but it also gives my attacks a burning property. It makes them much more lethal. I listened intently, hanging on every word. None of this was in my textbooks. Back at school, I thought a guidance technique was just a simple way to breathe in energy. I had no idea it was this complex. Look, she said, opening her palm. A ball of intense, searing fire flickered into existence above her skin. The heat was so strong it seemed to scorch the very air, leaving behind faint black streaks and a pungent, burnt smell. Then, she let the flames wrap around her fist and threw a casual punch into the empty air. Boom. A flaming fist print shot forward like a projectile. Just before it hit the wall, she blew a soft breath toward it, and the fire vanished instantly. My eyes widened. That was incredible. With the power of fire added to a strike, a regular martial artist wouldn't stand a chance. My heart started racing with anticipation. I wanted that power. Of course, she cautioned, manifesting your element externally isn't easy. For a rank 1 martial artist, even getting a tiny spark to cling to your fist is a massive achievement. I nodded, absorbing the lesson. She led me to a private room, and I took a deep breath before stepping inside. There are 7 main elements, Wu Linxian explained. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, and wind. Each has its own strengths. But if we're talking purely about raw destructive power, lightning is number 1. Metal is second, and fire is third. My eyes lit up. The strongest is lightning? I immediately wanted to learn the lightning guidance technique. Wu Linxian seemed to read my mind. She smiled, though there was a hint of realism in her expression. If we had a choice, everyone would pick lightning, she said. I stayed quiet, waiting for the catch. Seeing that I didn't impulsively jump in with questions, she looked even more impressed with me. You can't just pick whatever you want, she continued. It all depends on your affinity. You have to be compatible with the technique. I felt a sudden pang of nerves. I really wanted that top-tier destructive power, but affinity wasn't something I could control. Don't worry, Wu Linxian said, her voice tinged with a bit of envy. You managed to hit a combat power of 1863 as a rank 1 beginner without using any martial arts. That suggests you might have a special constitution that hasn't fully awakened yet. Even if your best affinity isn't for the strongest element, your future is still bright. President Wu, I asked, how strong is a special constitution exactly? She went silent for a moment, her expression turning dead serious. You just need to know one thing. Those with special constitutions are invincible among their peers. Fighting someone a rank higher than them is as easy as drinking water. Invincible among peers. Fighting above my rank. My blood started to simmer. I figured once I pushed my body refinement progress to 100%, I would probably awaken one of those constitutions. I needed more martial points, and I needed them fast. Back to the techniques, Wu Linxian said. Take me, for instance. My highest affinity is with the Skyflame technique. If I force myself to practice lightning, my efficiency and my actual combat power would be much lower than they are now. I nodded. She brought out 7 crystal balls, each a different color representing an element. Put your hand on them. They'll light up. The more the light fills the crystal, the higher your affinity. She gave me a demonstration. She placed her hand on the red crystal, and it glowed with a piercing red light. The glow filled about 4/5 of the sphere. My affinity for the Skyflame technique is about 80%, she said with a proud smile. A typical martial artist usually lands between 20 and 30%. 80% was huge. It explained how she became a branch president in her 30s as a rank 5 martial artist. Now your turn. She looked at me, her eyes full of expectation. She clearly thought I was a genius and expected me to beat her score, maybe hitting 90%. In her mind, that was already a monster level. Even a 1% difference at that level was a world of change. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. I reached out and touched the fire crystal first. The moment my skin met the glass, the room exploded in light. It wasn't just a glow, it was a blinding, roaring red radiance that far surpassed what Wu Linxian had produced. In a heartbeat, the crystal was completely saturated. Not a single empty crack remained. Wu Linxian's face went from expectant to completely blank. She looked stunned. What? The crystal is full, she whispered. 100% affinity. Suddenly, she let out a literal scream. She grabbed my shoulders and started shaking me, her eyes burning with a wild intensity. Do you have any idea what this means? I shook my head, slightly dazed. No. It means you can absorb fire energy with 0 waste, she shouted, her face turning red with excitement. Your cultivation efficiency will be the highest possible. She was shaking so hard her shoulders were trembling. Her 80% affinity meant she lost 20% of the energy she tried to absorb. Even so, she was a rank 5 at 30. She had never seen a 100% affinity in person. They existed, sure, but only in massive hubs like the capital or Demon City. And here we were in Star City, a mid to low tier city in Jiangnan province. I actually found a freak of nature, a genius on par with the elites of the capital, she muttered to herself. She looked like she wanted to pull out her phone and brag to all the other branch presidents in her group chat. Then she stopped herself. No, stay calm. If they find out, they'll try to steal him. I'd go crazy. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to settle down. She looked at me with a new kind of reverence. Suhong, don't even bother testing the others, she said firmly. You're practicing the Skyflame technique. Period. Wulincian wasn't done. She told me I likely possessed a special physique, one that would eventually allow me to master the Heavenly Eye guidance technique. To her, my path to becoming a top-tier powerhouse was now a mathematical certainty. I scratched my head, feeling a bit overwhelmed. To be honest, I still wanted to test the other elemental crystals. When I told her that, she looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. This is 100% affinity, she screamed in her head. I could see the frustration boiling behind her eyes. If this were her, she would have been dancing in the streets. Yet here I was, hesitating. For the first time in her life, the woman everyone called a genius felt the crushing weight of the gap between us. She took a deep breath to steady her voice. Fine, she said slowly. Try the others. But I can guarantee you that no other attribute will ever be this high. I just want to be sure, I nodded. I reached out and touched the lightning crystal ball. A split second later, a violent flash of purple light erupted. It filled the entire sphere instantly. I could even hear the faint, crackling roar of thunder echoing from within the glass. Wulincian's mind went blank. The world around her seemed to shatter. Another 100%. Another perfect match. She stood there like a statue, unable to utter a single word. Her thoughts were a mess of disbelief and curses. How was this possible? How could someone with a perfect fire affinity also have a perfect lightning affinity? This wasn't just talent anymore. It was monstrous. I didn't notice her staring at me like I was a freak of nature. My mind was racing. If my eternal unparalleled talent was as strong as I thought, would every single attribute be at 100%? I had to know. I reached for the wind attribute crystal. Wulincian watched me, speechless. She couldn't understand why I wasn't satisfied. Lightning was the most offensive, powerful element in existence. What more could I possibly want? It was already ridiculous enough to have two perfect affinities. Surely, there was no way. The wind crystal hummed. It lit up completely, glowing with a fierce, swirling intensity. Wulincian felt like she'd been struck by the very lightning I just tested. 3. That made 3 perfect attributes. She tried to tell herself it had to stop there. It was statistically impossible for it to continue. I moved to the next one. The gold attribute crystal flared to life. Wulincian's eyes went dull. I touched the wood attribute crystal. It saturated with green light. She began to gasp for air, her chest heaving. The water attribute crystal followed. Her expression turned numb. Finally, I touched the earth attribute crystal. It filled to the brim instantly. Wulincian felt her scalp go tight with pure shock. Her entire body was numb. There are only 7 elemental attributes in the world, and I was a perfect match for every single one of them. She felt like she was trapped in a dream. This wasn't reality. It couldn't be. I pulled my hand back, finally understanding. It was definitely because of my unique talent. I didn't have to choose based on what I was good at. I was perfect at everything. I could practice whatever I wanted. But that realization brought a new problem. I scratched my head, looking genuinely troubled. Seeing my expression, Wulincian looked like she was about to cough up blood. "What are you possibly worried about now?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "They're all at 100%, I said, looking at the glowing spheres with a heavy sigh. It's hard to choose. If I pick one, I feel like I'm wasting all the others. It feels like a huge loss." Wulincian grit her teeth so hard I thought they might shatter. She wanted to scream. She wanted to reach out and strangle me for being so honest about my ridiculous luck. She remembered how happy she was when her fire affinity hit 80%. She remembered how everyone envied her. But looking at me, she realized she had to stop thinking about it. If she kept comparing herself to me, she was going to lose her mind.